Chapter 334. When Yi Xian arrived outside the mountain gate, he discovered that the old man was no longer there. Had he left? Yi Xian frowned. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head slightly and left the underground mystic realm. Ancient Wu clan. In the treehouse, Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged on the ground. He was extremely excited. His current wealth was too terrifying. The wealth left behind by the Chen Yu sect would be enough for him to use for a very long time. Of course, no one would spend this wealth if they were not powerful enough. The crisis was not over yet. Cultivate. Yi Xian immediately returned to the Pale Sword sect after bidding farewell to Wei Yang Tian. At the moment, the Pale Sword sect was on high alert, and everyone was on standby. Everyone knew very well that the Realm Defense Alliance would definitely make a comeback. Inside the prison pagoda, ever since the second Dao Law had returned to the prison pagoda, it had been brought to the second floor by the Almighty on the second floor. Of course, Xiao Linger had also been brought in. However, not long after, Xiao Linger had run out dejectedly, and the Almighty on the second floor had not made a move. Yi Xian had been unable to contact him several times, and he had not been able to enter the second floor. Although he could have entered by force, he had not done so. Therefore, Yi Xian had gone to ask Xiao Linger. The little girl had looked aggrieved and said that the Almighty on the second floor had taken her treasure away. Obviously, it was the second Dao Law. Yi Xian knew that the Almighty on the second floor would probably come out soon. After comforting Xiao Linger, Yi Xian began to cultivate. But this time, his cultivation was purely about comprehension. Now, his sword technique and realm could no longer be improved. Especially his realm. Advancing too quickly was not a good thing either. The only thing that could be improved was his Sword Dao realm. Sword Immortal. If he could become a Sword Immortal, he would even be able to fight a powerhouse like Supremacy Lu. Enlightenment. At the back of the Cloud's Word Peak, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the peak, like an old monk in meditation. He sat there for more than 10 days. During this period, Yu Qi and Gu Shaoxian would come here every day. Every time they came, the two women would stand there for 2 to 4 hours before quietly leaving. In addition to the two women, Chen Beihan, the sect leader, had also come. He did not disturb Yi Xian, and even Jian Xian had come once. Jian Xian stayed for quite a long time. He stayed for more than half a day. In the beginning, there was a trace of worry in his eyes. However, when he left, the worry in his eyes turned into gratification. Lin Songyun also glanced at Yi Xian, but his eyes were filled with worry. This time, if the reinforcements from the Spirit Void Star Palace did not arrive first, things would be troublesome. A moment later, Lin Songyun shook his head, sighed, and left. Realm Protection Alliance. After the battle with Pale Sword Sect, there had been no movement from the Realm Protection Alliance. Now, Realm Protection Mountain was very peaceful. Inside the palace, Supremacy Lu sat cross-legged on a chair. His eyes were closed, and his hands were placed on his knees. An air current slowly drifted around him. Just at this moment, Supremacy Lu suddenly opened his eyes. Below, everyone looked at him. After a moment of silence, Supremacy Lu said softly, 5 days. My lord will personally come to this world in 5 days. 5 days. Hearing this, everyone's faces lit up with joy. 5 days from now, it would be the end of Pale Sword Sect. In a vast expanse of space, a nebula warship sped through the air. This warship's speed had already reached its limit. Finally, after an unknown period of time, the nebula warship stopped in front of a starry palace. An old man flew out of the warship. This person was Qin Zhen, who had rushed back from the Azure Firmament world. After disembarking from the warship, Qin Zhen headed straight for the Spirit Void Star Palace. Just as he arrived at the entrance, an old man appeared before him. This person was Palace Master Lin Su of the Spirit Void Star Palace. Qin Zhen bowed deeply. Palace Master, I've found him. Lin Su was stunned and then he said, Where? Wait, why didn't you bring him back? Qin Zhen laughed bitterly. I couldn't. There's a power in that stellar region that's bent on killing him. He's in great danger now. Lin Su's expression instantly changed. What power is it? Qin Zhen shook his head. A third-rate power. However, the leader of that power is rather formidable. Song Yun and I aren't a match for him. Lin Su spoke in a low voice. Did you report it to my Spirit Void Star Palace? Qin Zhen laughed bitterly. I did. They've never heard of me. My stellar region is too remote. Lin Su fell silent for a moment. He was about to speak when he suddenly turned around. There was a woman standing not too far away from him. It was the woman in a plain dress. Her expression was icy cold, and she emanated an extremely oppressive aura. Lin Su hurriedly bowed. Senior. The woman looked at Qin Zhen. Where is he? Qin Zhen hurriedly said. At the edge of the never-ending stellar region. It's a month and a half from here. A month and a half. The woman in the plain dress frowned. In the next moment, she vanished on the spot. Lin Su heaved a huge sigh of relief when he saw this. Gone. Finally gone. During this period of time, everyone in Spirit Void Star Palace had been trembling in fear because this great god was too terrifying. Everyone was afraid that if something happened to the person she was looking for, she would destroy Spirit Void Star Palace with a single strike. Beside Lin Su, Qin Zhen said in a low voice, Palace Master, do you know who this person is? Lin Su shook his head. I don't know. However, according to my guess, this person might be someone from that dimension. Qin Zhen's expression changed slightly. The fifth dimension? Lin Su said softly. It's extremely likely. Qin Zhen wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. If it really is. Lin Su shook his head and sighed. This matter has also given me a reminder. Although my Spirit Void Star Palace isn't bad, in front of a true peerless expert, we are still unable to withstand a single blow. We still need to continue working hard. There is no strongest, only stronger. At this point, he seemed to think of something and looked at Qin Zhen. Quickly bring a group of people to the never-ending starfield. No matter what, the Realm Defense Alliance has looked down on my Spirit Void Star Palace. Even if that senior lets them go, we cannot let them go. Qin Zhen hurriedly nodded. This subordinate also has this intention. After saying this, he turned and left. At this time, Lin Su said, Do your best to befriend that youth, understand? Qin Zhen nodded. This subordinate understands. After Qin Zhen left, Lin Su slowly closed his eyes and said softly, Realm Defense Alliance, you really are courting death. In an endless void, the woman in the plain dress flew through the air. Her speed could no longer be described as fast. She was directly piercing through the starry sky. Her speed was extremely fast, so fast that everywhere she passed, the starry sky trembled and countless planets were affected. After an unknown amount of time, a voice suddenly rang out in the starry sky in front of her. Who dares to tear apart the starry sky and disturb the order of the starry sky? As this voice fell, a powerful force suddenly crushed towards the woman in the plain dress. This force was so strong that it could easily destroy a world. The woman in the plain dress was expressionless. She looked into the depths of the starry sky and narrowed her eyes. In an instant, a ray of sword light suddenly shot out from her eyes. As this ray of sword light flew out, the force in front of her instantly shattered. The next moment, a scream came from the depths of the starry sky in the distance. Soon, a shocked voice rang out. You, who are you? The woman in the plain dress clasped her hands behind her back, her expression cold. Scram! In the distant starry sky, the voice said angrily. Do you know that we are the guardians of the starry sky's order? The woman in the plain dress suddenly said. There is no need to scram. As her voice fell, she disappeared from where she stood. In the blink of an eye, a ray of sword light suddenly flashed through the starry sky. Chi! Somewhere, a bloody head slowly fell from the starry sky. Along the way, every time the woman in the plain dress arrived in a starry sky, someone would stop her. Then, just like this, the woman in the plain dress killed her way forward. On a certain mountain, a woman in a white dress stood quietly. It was Enlancio. After an unknown period of time, an old man appeared by Enlancio's side, and the old man bowed slightly. Young Mississippi. Enlancio spoke in a light voice. Speak. The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, In a few days at most, the Lord of the Realm Defense Alliance will personally descend upon the firmament world. At that time, the firmament sword sect will definitely be annihilated unless the sword master of the firmament world reappears. Enlancio fell silent for a moment, and then she nodded. I understand. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Meanwhile, The old man suddenly obstructed Enlonsio's path and laughed bitterly. Young miss, the patriarch has given strict orders that young miss isn't allowed to head to the firmament sword sect. Enloncio shook her head. He's in a very dangerous situation this time. The old man's smile grew even more bitter. Young miss, if the Lord of the Realm Defense Alliance personally descends upon the firmament world, then it would be useless even if you head there. Enloncio spoke indifferently. Then there is even more reason for me to go. As soon as she finished speaking, she intended to leave the mountain. Meanwhile, the old man hesitated for a moment before he said, Young miss, the patriarch has given orders. If young miss insists on going, then I can only offend you. Enloncio's sudden disappearance caused the old man's expression to change drastically, and he slapped his right palm forward. Bang! With a loud explosion, the old man was sent flying hundreds of feet away. The old man looked at Enloncio with astonishment. Young miss, you! Enloncio shook her head. No one in Mayan clan can stop me. Understand? As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and descended the mountain. On the mountain, the old man slapped his thigh and was extremely excited. What a great young miss! Even if the Firmament World Swordmaster is reincarnated, he can't compare to her. This won't do. Nothing can happen to her. I must notify the Patriarch as soon as possible. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished into the horizon. Firmament World. Firmament Sword Sect. Yi Xian was still meditating by the river. During this period of time, he'd been constantly comprehending. Sword Immortal. Once one calmed down and pondered properly, one would notice many problems that one hadn't thought of in the past, and one would also notice some new things. Sword Dao. This path was like rowing a boat against the current. If one didn't work hard every single day and didn't move forward, then one would definitely move backward. On the other hand, he'd been meditating by the river for almost half a month. During this half a month, he'd been questioning himself from the depths of his heart. He didn't avoid his heart, but he knew his heart. Knew himself. This understanding was to know his strong points, but he also had to know his weak points. He had to know his good side, but he had to know the evil and dirty side of his heart. At dawn, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and sword light flickered within them. Yi Xian stood up slowly and remained silent. This silence lasted for an entire morning. P.S. Does anyone want to hit me? Chapter 335. At noon, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. He smiled very happily. As Yi Xian's smile appeared, a gust of sword intent suddenly floated out of his body and then drifted into the sky. Soon, the sword intent disappeared from the world. At this time, a sword suddenly flew out of Yi Xian's body and was about to fly up into the sky. However, Yi Xian's right hand gently pressed down and the sword immediately landed in front of him. Enlightened Sword Heart. At this moment, he truly understood what enlightened sword heart meant. To put it bluntly, it was to clearly understand oneself. A person has his or her strengths and weaknesses. There is a good side and an evil side. There is a pure side and an evil side. And a person will often escape from their inner heart, which is to escape from their evil side. No matter which side it is him, Yi Xian. This is enlightened sword heart. Sword Immortal. At this moment, he was no longer a half-step sword immortal, but a true sword immortal. However, Yi Xian had a feeling that his sword Dao had just begun. After a while, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He turned around and was about to leave. Not far away, two women slowly walked over. It was Xueqi and Gu Shaoxian. Yi Xian bowed slightly to the two. Xueqi sized him up and asked, "Is it done?" Yi Xian smiled and nodded. Seeing this, the corner of Xueqi's mouth curled up. Good. Good. Gu Shaoxian also nodded. Excellent. Saying this, she glanced at Xueqi and said softly, "He should be the youngest sword immortal in our firmament world, right?" Xueqi shook his head. "He is the youngest sword immortal in the history of our firmament world besides the ancestral master." No, when the ancestral master became a sword immortal, he was around his age. Saying this, the smile on her face gradually widened. Gu Shaoxian said softly, "Little junior sister has not been so happy in a long time." Xueqi looked at Yi Xian, his smile gradually vanishing. Azure Sword Sect finally has a successor. We should be happy. At this point, she seemed to have thought of something and said, "Keep this matter to yourself for now and don't spread it. Otherwise, the Realm Defense Alliance will kill you at all costs." Gu Shaoxian nodded. Indeed. If the Realm Defense Alliance knew that Yi Xian had become a sword immortal, then the Realm Defense Alliance would definitely go crazy and kill Yi Xian. Because they absolutely did not dare to allow Yi Xian to continue growing. Most of the time, there was no right or wrong. It was like a country. It was the most powerful country in the world, and another country wanted to rise. Thus, they were naturally in opposition. Moreover, Yi Xian was a disciple of the Blue Sword sect. One had to know that the Blue Sword sect and the Realm Protecting Alliance had a long history of enmity. Yi Xian personally prepared a meal. After the three of them were full, Yi Xian tidied up and went to find Lin Songyun. In the room. Lin Songyun sized up Yi Xian. Moments later, he suddenly frowned. "Have you broken through?" Yi Xian didn't hide it and directly released his aura. Sword immortal. Lin Songyun was stunned at this scene, and then he shook his head and smiled. "Young friend, you really are a genius. To be able to become a sword immortal at such a young age is extremely rare, even in the galaxy I come from." Yi Xian smiled. "Senior, I came here today because I have something to ask." Lin Songyun smiled. "Speak," Yi Xian said in a low voice. "The woman in the plain dress. Is she her main body or a clone?" Lin Songyun was stunned when he heard this. Main body? Clone? As if remembering something, he suddenly stood up. What do you mean?" Yi Xian was taken aback by Lin Songyun's question. The reason he asked this was because the woman in the plain dress had said that she had a total of 3 clones. The previous one had already disappeared. In other words, there were 2 more clones and her main body. He and the woman in the plain dress had a promise, and that was that they would meet again in the clouds. This meeting was not referring to the clone, but the main body. That was why he asked this question. Lin Songyun stared deadly at Yi Xian. "You are saying that the person who appeared in my spiritual Void Star Palace could be just a clone?" Yi Xian nodded. Seeing this, Lin Songyun immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. He sat down, his whole body a little weak. Clone. At this moment, his heart was in extreme shock. Because all this time, they had never thought about whether the woman in the plain dress was a clone or her main body. Who would have thought about this? But if the woman in the plain dress was just a clone, then there was a problem. Just how powerful was her main body? How powerful? Lin Songyun laughed bitterly. He couldn't imagine it. Yi Xian was about to continue asking when Lin Songyun shook his head. "My friend, I don't know if she's a clone or her main body. May I ask what's your relationship with her?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "We can be considered master and disciple." Master and disciple. Lin Songyun took a deep look at Yi Xian, and then he sighed. "No wonder you're so outstanding. With such a good teacher, even if you're a pig." When he spoke up to hear, he seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly stopped. After that, he smiled apologetically at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was slightly speechless. "How could you speak like that?" Lin Songyun continued. "My friend, you're already a sword immortal now. With your current strength, you can actually leave this place and head to a better place to develop. If you leave with me now, you'll..." Yi Xian suddenly laughed. "Senior, there are some things that are more important than your life." Lin Songyun looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned. "Pale Sword Sect has treated me well. How can I leave now? If I leave, how can I have a clear conscience? Moreover, there are many people that I care about in this world. Perhaps one day, I'll leave this world and see the outside world. But not now." Lin Songyun fell silent for a moment, and then he said softly, "My friend is so loyal. I'm afraid you'll be burdened by your emotions in the future." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Senior, if the experts of Spirit Void Star Palace come to reinforce us, how long will it take for them to arrive?" Lin Songyun said solemnly, "It's not a problem how long it takes. The problem is that they must arrive before the Realm Protector Alliance leader. Otherwise..." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, "There's one more thing I'd like to ask Senior. I'm currently at the True Imperial Law Realm, but what realm is above the Formation Law Realm?" Lin Songyun opened his right hand, and then he spun it lightly. In an instant, the space around his palm cracked open, and then a wave of energy seeped into his hand from the crack in space. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "What's this?" Lin Songyun said softly. "Above the true Imperial Law realm is the void-piercing realm. The void-piercing realm means to break open space and obtain the energy of dark matter from within space to continuously strengthen oneself. It's extremely difficult to accomplish this because the firmness of space far surpasses what ordinary people can imagine." "The void-piercing realm," Yi Xian said solemnly. "I heard Master say that if space cracks open, there will be spatial turbulence. If one is swept into it, they will definitely die a horrible death." Lin Songyun smiled. She's right. Thus, in order to reach the void-piercing realm, one's attainments in space must reach a certain level. If one uses brute force to break through space, it will only harm oneself. Many wandering cultivators, because they don't have anyone to guide them, play themselves to death when trying to break through to this realm. At this point, he looked at Yi Xian. "Young friend, if you want to break through to this realm, you must be extremely careful. Moreover, you must have someone by your side to protect you. Otherwise, if anything goes wrong, not to mention young friend, even we will not be able to survive if we are swept into it." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Since senior says so, I understand." Void-piercing realm. Yi Xian deeply remembered this. Chen Beihan, Supreme Lord Lu, should be void-piercing realm cultivators. At this point, Yi Xian asked again, "Can a true Imperial Law realm cultivator fight against a void-piercing realm cultivator?" "Of course," Lin Songyun said. "To measure a person's strength, it's not just by their realm. It also depends on other aspects, such as battle awareness, battle skills, techniques, cultivation methods, physique, and even bloodline. In short, there are people who can challenge those of a higher realm. It's just that it's more difficult." Yi Xian nodded. Actually, the current him wanted to fight against a void-piercing realm cultivator, because the true Imperial Law realm was no longer attractive to him. A moment later, Yi Xian got up and left. Inside the room, Lin Songyun's eyes were filled with worry. Even now, he was still worried that the cultivators of the Spirit Void Star Palace would not be able to arrive as soon as possible. Realm Defense Alliance. On this day, Supreme Lord Lu, who was sitting cross-legged in the main hall, suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment, he got up and walked out of the hall. At the same time, a voice suddenly rang out from within the hall. "Pass down my orders. All true Imperial Law realm cultivators of the Realm Defense Alliance are to head to Pale Sword Sect. In addition, inform all the forces in Azure Firmament World that if they do not come with us to fight against Pale Sword Sect today, they will be the enemy of our Realm Defense Alliance." At the door of the hall, the Left Protector said solemnly, "This action may anger some people." Supreme Lord Lu said indifferently, "They want to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight, but our Realm Defense Alliance will not. If they do not come, we will take care of them all at once." The Left Protector was stunned, then hurriedly said, "But the Lord is coming." Supreme Lord Lu nodded slightly. "He will be here soon. This time, we must take advantage of the Lord's arrival to eliminate some of the forces with ulterior motives. We can also take advantage of the origin heart of the divine central continent." The Left Protector nodded. "That's true. After so many years, many forces in the Azure Firmament World have gradually expanded. They think that they can compete with our Realm Defense Alliance. This time, we must let them understand that in the eyes of our Realm Defense Alliance, they are still ants." At the door, Supreme Lord Lu slowly closed his eyes. "Yi Xian, this time, I want to see if that woman behind you can still protect you." With that, he disappeared from the hall. At the same time, all the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance moved out. Very quickly, the Realm Defense Alliance's edict spread throughout the entire divine central continent. For a time, the entire Azure Firmament World was in an uproar. The Realm Defense Alliance was forcing everyone to take a stand. If they did not help the Realm Defense Alliance, they would be the enemy. Domineering. Incomparably domineering. At first, no forces moved, but at noon, some of the forces experts began to head to Pale Sword Sect. Chapter 336. Outside Pale Sword Sect, more and more forces were gathering. Among them, the famous ones were Frosty North Sect, Thousand Beast Mountain Range, Skycloud City, and even one of the top 4 clans, Sima family. Other than that, there were countless other smaller forces. Of course, those who came were all true Imperial Realm experts. This time, Pale Sword Sect was being targeted by the entire Azure world. Everyone knew that the Realm Protector Alliance leader was coming to the Azure Firmament world personally. How terrifying would an expert of this level be? And at this time, the Realm Protecting Alliance wanted everyone to express their stance. Those who didn't would definitely be dealt with after Pale Sword Sect was dealt with. If the Blue Sword Sect's ancestor, the Swordmaster, was still here, perhaps everyone would hesitate. But now that the Swordmaster was gone, what could the Blue Sword Sect use to fight against the Realm Protection Alliance? More and more experts rushed to Pale Sword Sect and expressed their willingness to form an alliance with the Realm Protecting Alliance to deal with Pale Sword Sect. Outside Pale Sword Sect, it was surrounded by countless experts. Somewhere above the clouds, Supreme Lu placed his hands behind his back, expressionless. Behind Supreme Lu, the Left Protector said, Upper Realm and Li family and Celestial Gate are not making any moves. Celestial Gate. Supreme Lu went silent for a moment and said softly, Ignore them as long as they don't help Pale Sword Sect. The Left Protector nodded slightly. These few families and Celestial Gate were not simple. Even the Realm Protecting Alliance was afraid of them. Moreover, once these few clans joined hands, the trouble would not be small. At this moment, the Left Protector suddenly said, Should we act now? Supreme Lu shook his head. Wait for the Lord. The Left Protector spoke in a low voice. We now have 13 void-piercing realms and 59 true Imperial magic realms. Moreover, there are even more true Imperial magic realm powerhouses rushing over. With such a lineup, it is enough to destroy Blue Sword Sect. Supreme Lu said softly, Wait for the Lord. Only when the Lord is here can we be foolproof. The Left Protector looked at Supreme Lu. Are you still afraid of the person behind Yi Xian? Supreme Lu nodded. That person is very powerful, not someone we can fight against. Only his lordship could deal with her. All in all, we are not in a rush. Moreover, many factions in the Azure Firmament world have yet to express their stance. The Left Protector pondered, What is the background of the person behind Yi Xian? Lord Lu shook his head. I don't know, but my instinct tells me that she will appear. If this person doesn't die, my heart won't be at ease. The Left Protector nodded. Then let's wait for now. Below, within the Blue Sword Sect. In a great hall, the experts of the Azure Sword Sect gathered. Yi Xian was also present. Chen Beihan glanced at the crowd and softly said, Everyone, the Realm Protection Alliance is determined to destroy my Pale Sword Sect this time. Jian Xian said indifferently, So be it. Everyone in the hall nodded. Right now they had no choice but to fight. Chen Beihan nodded, then looked at Yi Xian and Xiangyu below. Later the two of you will leave, understand? The two of them were about to speak when Chen Beihan said seriously, Although the two of you are not weak, it is useless in this battle. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, Sect leader, if the two of us leave, what about the other disciples of the Pale Sword Sect? Chen Beihan went silent. Yi Xian smiled, Sect leader, it is really unfair to treat the other disciples like this. I feel that we are all disciples of the Pale Sword Sect. We should walk together, fight together, and die together. Beside Yi Xian, Xiangyu nodded, I have the same thought. Looking at Yi Xian, Chen Beihan had a complicated look in his eyes. If you don't leave, the Pale Sword Sect might completely disappear from the Azure Firmament world. Yi Xian smiled. So what? Saying so, he shook his head. If the sect is in trouble, we will naturally stay behind. If we leave now, Yi Xian can't do it. At this time, Yu Qi, who was not far from Yi Xian, looked at him. Sometimes, it is more important to live, do you understand? Yi Xian shook his head. Anyway, I will not leave now. Moreover, I feel that our Pale Sword Sect might have the strength to fight. If we work together, why would we fear the Realm Defense Alliance? Even if our Pale Sword Sect loses, so what? At least we won't die a useless death. Not far away, Jian Xian nodded. Well said. What is there to fear about death? Useless people who are afraid of death. Chen Beihan looked at the two of them and shook his head with a smile. A moment later, Yi Xian and Xiangyu left the hall, leaving only Chen Beihan and Jian Xian. Chen Beihan said softly, If they don't leave our Pale Sword Sect. Jian Xian looked at Chen Beihan. Do you know why it is so hard to improve your sword Dao? Because you think too much, Finished speaking, Jian Xian turned and left. Inside the hall, Chen Beihan was silent for a long time. Finally, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. As the leader of a sect, he naturally had to think a little more and consider a little more. One had to know that every decision he made was related to the life and death of countless disciples in Pale Sword sect. The position of sect master was a kind of power, but also a kind of restriction. Outside Pale Sword sect, more and more experts rushed over. At this moment, countless forces in Azure Firmament World had already expressed their stance. Even Blue Waves Academy had expressed its stance on Realm Defense Alliance. Moreover, Blue Waves Academy's dean, Qiu Yuan, had personally rushed over. What was worth mentioning was that Shen Gate, and Clan and Li Clan in Upper World had not made any move. Outside Pale Sword sect, somewhere in the clouds, an old man suddenly appeared behind Lu Xun. Xun, not good. Lu Xun opened his eyes. What's wrong? The old man said solemnly. 4 of us were assassinated. Assassinated? Lu Xun narrowed his eyes. Let's go take a look. Soon, the 2 of them arrived on the ground. In front of Lu Xun and the old man, there were 4 corpses. Every one of the corpses had their throats slit by a sword. Lu Xun clenched his right hand. It's swordsman. Behind Lu Xun, the old man nodded. It should be swordsman. He is probably an expert in Pale Sword sect. Lu Xun asked solemnly. Did you find anything? The old man shook his head. When we found them, they were already assassinated. And before that, there was no movement at all. Lu Xun was silent for a moment, then said, Pass down the order, don't let anyone be alone, everyone should stay together. At this moment, his expression suddenly changed. The next moment, he turned around abruptly. A few dozen feet away from him, a true Imperial Spell Realm expert slowly fell to the ground. The true Imperial Spell Realm expert's eyes were wide open, filled with disbelief. Lu Xun's expression was extremely gloomy. Someone had actually assassinated an expert from the Realm Defense Alliance in front of him, and he hadn't noticed at all. All the experts from the Realm Defense Alliance had solemn expressions as well. After all, Lu Xun was right here, but Lu Xun hadn't noticed anything. If even Lu Xun couldn't notice, then their expressions changed when they thought of this. Calm down. Lu Xun suddenly spoke coldly. It's just an assassin. As he spoke, he glanced coldly at the surroundings. Who exactly are you? Do you only know how to hide in the dark? Hiss. Right at this moment, the head of a true defense realm expert flew into the air not far from Lu Xun's left. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. At the same time, Exalted Lord Lu suddenly vanished and appeared before the true defense realm expert. He clenched his fists tightly before pressing them down lightly. In an instant, a powerful aura suddenly surged out with him at the center, and it caused the entire sky to tremble. However, there was nothing. A moment later, the aura released by Lu Xun gradually calmed down, and the surroundings were silent. Lu Xun slowly closed his eyes, and all the experts from the Realm Defense Alliance around him were extremely vigilant. At this time, the 2 protectors of the Realm Defense Alliance appeared with 8 golden-robed experts. These 8 people and the 2 protectors looked around vigilantly. A moment later, the left protector looked at Lu Xun, soundless. Lu Xun nodded. This person attacked right in front of me, but I couldn't feel his aura at all. Even the mistress of the dark world couldn't do this. This person shouldn't be an assassin from the firmament world. The left protector frowned slightly. Could it be an assassin that the Firmament Sword sect invited from the outer domain? Lu Xun shook his head. I don't know. The left protector said in a low voice. We can't go on like this. Otherwise, our people will fall into disarray. As he spoke, he looked at the Firmament Sword sect below. Should we act now? Lu Xun shook his head. If we act now with this person's methods, more of our people will die. At this moment, a few dozen feet away, a golden-robed expert's expression suddenly changed, and in the next moment, he slammed his palms forward. Boom! Following a muffled sound, a silhouette flashed across the space. However, from the golden-robed expert's throat, a stream of blood spurted out. Lu Xun's figure flickered, and he appeared in front of the golden-robed expert. The expert stared fixedly at him, his body trembling violently. Lu Xun turned around to look, but there was still nothing in front of him. At this moment, Lu Xun's heart was really flustered. This golden-robed expert was a myriad empty realm expert. Even an expert of this level was assassinated. Who was it? Lu Xun's gaze swept across the surroundings, and his expression was extremely cold. Who are you? Why are you going against the Realm Defense Alliance? There was no response from the surroundings. Just as Lu Xun was about to speak again, a few dozen feet to the left, the head of a true defensive realm expert flew into the air. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed, and they all gathered together. In the dark, Yi Xian was about to make another move, but at this moment, an invisible pressure suddenly appeared in the sky. After this pressure appeared, the entire sky became illusory. This pressure descended layer by layer, as if the sky was collapsing, and it wanted to crush the entire world. It's here. The leader of the Realm Defense Alliance has arrived. Within the Firmament Sword sect, Lin Songyun sighed. It's over. P.S. Some people say that I'm thick-skinned, is that true? In the air, Lord Lu looked down at Yi Xian and said mockingly, "Do you think you are worthy to challenge me?" Yi Xian suddenly shot up into the sky and came in front of Lord Lu. He looked at Lord Lu and said, "Just one sentence, do you want to fight or not?" Everyone turned to look at Lord Lu. Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian and said, "No matter what made you arrogant enough to challenge me, you will regret it very soon." As soon as he finished speaking, a powerful pressure suddenly swept out from his body. This pressure was like a wave that crushed towards Yi Xian. In the distance, Yi Xian was expressionless. He took a step forward and a sword essence suddenly appeared in front of him. This sword essence forcefully blocked Lord Lu's pressure. When he saw this sword essence, Lord Lu's face changed. Sword essence turning into heaven and earth. You are a sword celestial. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Hearing this, everyone in the surroundings was stunned. Sword celestial? A sword immortal? Everyone looked at Yi Xian, including the experts from Pale Sword Sect, and looked at Yi Xian. In the air, Yi Xian opened his palm and a sword appeared in his hand. All the sword essence in the surroundings gathered towards the sword in his hand. Bas! A sword's hum suddenly resounded in the sky. Yi Xian pointed his sword at Lord Lu. "Come and fight." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, a sword light suddenly slashed down from Lord Lu's head. Below, Lord Lu narrowed his eyes and a cold light flashed in his eyes. In the next moment, he stomped his right foot and shot up into the sky, meeting the sword with his fist. Bang! In the sky, an explosion sounded like a clap of thunder. Then, a figure retreated hundreds of feet away. This person was Yi Xian. After stopping, Yi Xian suddenly held a sword in his hand and pointed at Lord Lu's waist. In the next moment, countless sword lights suddenly pierced the space around Lord Lu. Instant space sword. Seeing the sudden appearance of these swords, Lord Lu frowned and slammed his right hand in front of him. Rumble! The entire sky shook violently. In an instant, countless sword lights shattered and a sword suddenly appeared above Lord Lu's head. Lord Lu raised both of his arms to block the attack. Bang! Under everyone's gaze, Lord Lu retreated hundreds of feet away. Everyone gasped at the sight of this scene. Shock! At this moment, everyone was shocked. Who was Lord Lu? He was one of the top experts in the firmament world. What about Yi Xian? Yi Xian was not even 20 years old. A 20-year-old sword immortal? A 20-year-old fighting against a void-piercing realm cultivator? Even in the entire history of the firmament world, this was rare. A monster. A real monster. At this moment, the forces behind the Realm Protection Alliance were a little afraid. If Yi Xian did not die, once he grew up, who would be able to stop Yi Xian? At this thought, many people looked at Yi Xian with murderous intent. Of course, there were also some who wanted to retreat. This kind of monster was too terrifying. Below, countless Firmament Sword Sect disciples and elders were wild with joy. A sword immortal who was not even 20 years old. This was an existence comparable to the founder of the firmament world. With Yi Xian around, the Firmament Sword Sect would definitely prosper. In the air, Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian with a ferocious expression. Yi Xian, oh Yi Xian, you've really surprised me a bit. I thought that you were at most at the True Defense realm. I never expected that not only did you reach the True Defense realm, but you also became a sword immortal. If you were given 10 years, I'm afraid no one in the firmament world would be a match for you. Unfortunately, You don't have the time. Yi Xian smiled. Then I hope that Lord Lu can kill me. As you wish. As soon as Lord Lu finished his sentence, he disappeared from where he stood. The next moment, a shadow suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Then, a palm print landed on Yi Xian's head. At this moment, the space around Yi Xian cracked. Obviously, this Lord Lu had really given it his all. This was because Yi Xian's talent really made him afraid. If he did not get rid of Yi Xian now, the Realm Protection Alliance would be doomed in the future. Below the palm print, Yi Xian's expression was calm. Suddenly, he stabbed upwards with his sword. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. One sword to determine life and death. Now that he had become a sword immortal, the power of this one sword to determine life and death had instantly increased by many times. With this one sword, the space that the sword passed through instantly cracked. This one sword had the power of the void-piercing realm. Boom! All of a sudden, the entire sky shook violently as if thunder had exploded. Then, two figures retreated rapidly. These two figures were Yi Xian and Lord Lu. Yi Xian stopped after retreating more than 200 feet while Lord Lu only retreated less than 100 feet. Obviously, in this confrontation, Yi Xian was at a disadvantage. Yi Xian raised his head to look at Lord Lu in the distance with a serious expression. At this moment, his entire right arm had lost all feeling. Not only that, but the sword in his hand also had cracks. That was the injury caused by the power of dark matter. Opposite Yi Xian, Lord Lu's expression was also somewhat serious. This was because he had used all his strength in the punch just now. His goal was to kill Yi Xian with one punch to prevent future troubles. However, Yi Xian took this punch. He took it. Lord Lu took a deep breath and a murderous intent surged in his eyes. This Yi Xian must die. The next moment, Lord Lu suddenly flew out. A gust of powerful energy suddenly gathered in his right arm. When he arrived in front of Yi Xian, he suddenly made a seal with his right hand. The next moment, he gently shook his arm forward. Rumble! As soon as the seal was formed, the space in front of Yi Xian instantly distorted. Then, there was a violent tremor and countless cracks appeared in the space. Space turbulence. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene. However, he didn't panic, and he hurriedly activated the spatial Tao laws. In an instant, the space in the surroundings actually started to heal by itself, and in less than half a breath of time, all the cracks in space had healed completely. At this moment, everyone was stunned. Even Lord Lu was dumbfounded. He looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. This is impossible. How can you repair space? Not only Lord Lu, but Chen Beihan and the others below were also confused. One should know that they could break space, but it was impossible for them to repair space themselves. However, Yi Xian had done it. This did not make sense. In the air, Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian. How did you do it? Do you want to know? Yi Xian asked with a smile. Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian. How did you do it? Yi Xian grinned. Call me Grandpa and I will tell you. Lord Lu's expression turned cold. You have a death wish. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged at Yi Xian. In the distance, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up. In the next moment, the power of space suddenly gathered towards him. In the blink of an eye, a sword was formed. The Sword of Space. When the Sword of Space was formed, Yi Xian grabbed it. At the same time, the good and evil sword intent surged into the Sword of Space. In front of Yi Xian, Lord Lu's expression changed drastically when he saw the Sword of Space in Yi Xian's hand. His intuition told him that he was in danger. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed at him with the sword. The space trembled as the sword passed. It was resonating. After a moment of silence, a ray of sword light suddenly exploded in the sky. Then, a figure frantically retreated. This retreat was no less than 1,000 feet away. This person was Lord Lu. Lord Lu lost? Everyone was petrified on the spot. End of this chapter. Chapter 338. Defeated? Everyone was in disbelief, including Chen Beihan and the others. At this moment, their faces were filled with astonishment. Especially Chen Beihan, he was well aware of Lord Lu's strength. It could be said that in the entire firmament world, There weren't many who could defeat Lord Lu. And these people were all existences at the level of old monsters. And Yi Xian wasn't even 20 years old. How was this possible? In the air, Lord Lu's eyes were a little dazed. He had indeed been defeated in that strike. He had been pushed back hundreds of meters by Yi Xian's sword. Although he hadn't been completely defeated, he had been defeated. Being pushed back by a young junior with a single strike, if that wasn't defeat, then what was? At this moment, Lord Lu wasn't angry, nor exasperated. On the contrary, he was very calm. He looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's face was pale, and his body was trembling slightly. Lord Lu looked straight at Yi Xian. If I'm not wrong, that strike just now consumed a lot of your strength, right? Yi Xian was silent. Just as Lord Lu had said, that strike just now had consumed a lot of his strength. However, the power of that strike had exceeded his expectations. Before this, he had never used the Sword of Space. Therefore, he had no idea about the power of the Sword of Space. At this moment, when he used that strike, he knew that it could seriously injure a void-piercing realm expert. In the distance, Lord Lu suddenly said, Yi Xian, I have to say that my Realm Defense Alliance has greatly underestimated you from the beginning. You're even more monstrous than we thought. As he spoke, he glanced at the Firmament Sword sect below and continued, If we allow you to continue to grow, the Firmament Sword sect will have another Firmament Sword Master in the future. There was silence all around. At this moment, there were nearly 100 experts gathered around the Firmament Sword sect, and all of them were true Imperial Law Realm experts. They were all from various forces. At this moment, everyone was looking at Yi Xian. In the past, although Yi Xian had some fame, it was only in the younger generation. But now it was different. Yi Xian's strength could not be compared to the older generation. Right now, Yi Xian wasn't even 20 years old. If he was given more time, he would definitely become the second Firmament Sword Master. Thinking of this, killing intent gradually appeared in their eyes. By coming here, it meant that they were standing on the side of the Realm Protection Alliance. And if Yi Xian did not die today, he would settle the score in the future. Yi Xian must die. Right at this moment, someone shouted from the surroundings. Aside from the Ashen Sword sect, when everyone else looked at Yi Xian, their eyes were either icy cold or filled with dense killing intent. Eliminate Yi Xian. At this moment no longer. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Just the Realm Protection Alliance alone wanted to eliminate Yi Xian. Below, Chen Beihan and the others had already appeared around Yi Xian. At this moment, they could already feel the killing intent of the surrounding experts. Chen Beihan said solemnly, Yi Xian later, no matter what, you have to leave the Firmament Sword sect. Do you understand? Yi Xian was about to shake his head when Xueqi suddenly said, If you leave, even if we all die, we will be happy in our hearts. Do you understand? Yi Xian shook his head. I am not happy. Xueqi's beautiful eyes were filled with anger. Why are you so disobedient? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Master, I can't leave now. Look at these people. Which one of them will let me leave? Xueqi was silent. At this moment, Jian Xian suddenly said, Then let's fight. Stay and fight with these people. Whether we live or die, let the heavens decide. Yi Xian nodded. This was also what he was thinking at this moment. Although there were many people in his heart that he was reluctant to part with and there were many people that he missed, he had no choice. There were some things that he had to do. Beside Lu's supremacy, the left protector suddenly said, If we attack now, Firmament Sword sect will have no way to survive. And if we drag this out, the surrounding people will change their minds. At that time, Lu's supremacy looked at the sky. The pressure was getting heavier and heavier. Obviously, his lord's real body was about to descend. Thinking of this, Lu's supremacy suddenly waved his right hand. Attack! As his voice fell, the experts from the Realm Protection Alliance directly rushed down towards the Blue Sword sect below. The experts from the other forces also hesitated for a moment before they also followed suit. More than 100 true Imperial Dharma Realm experts. How terrifying was this lineup? Below, Jian Xian suddenly laughed. Come, let's fight to our heart's content. As his voice fell, he held his sword and soared into the sky. In the air, a true Imperial Dharma Realm expert's head directly flew off. Beside Lu's supremacy, the left and right protectors immediately surrounded Jian Xian. Below, Chen Beihan said softly, "Brothers and sisters, let's meet again in the next life." As his voice fell, he waved his right hand and soared up with his sword. Not far from Yi Xian, Gu Shaoxian said softly, "Let's meet again in the next life." As soon as she said this, her body trembled slightly. Countless rays of sword light shot out from her body. In an instant, the rays of sword light filled the sky. Sword array. Using one's body as a sword array. Needless to say, the power of this sword formation was extremely great. Unfortunately, she was facing too many experts. As soon as the sword array appeared, it was directly blasted by the combined attacks of more than a dozen experts. On the other side, Zhang Tai and the others also soared into the sky and met the experts in the sky. Crushed. As soon as the battle began, Firmament Sword Sec's side was crushed. Because in terms of numbers, Firmament Sword Sec's side was far inferior. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Yes. Rumble. At this moment, a deafening explosion suddenly sounded in the sky. Then, a figure slowly fell from the sky. When he saw the figure, Yi Xian was instantly stunned. This person was Zhang Tai. In the air, Zhang Tai suddenly turned his head to look at Yi Xian and grinned. "Shameless Yi, if you are still alive after today, remember to go to the weapon forging peak. There is something left for you there." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned to look at the dozen people who were rushing down from the sky and laughed maniacally. "Come on." As soon as he finished speaking, his body suddenly expanded. The next moment, boom! Zhang Tai suddenly exploded. A powerful ray of sword light swept across the sky. The two people who were leading the dozen people were directly torn into pieces by the ray of sword light. The rest of them also retreated frantically. Self-destruction. At this moment, Yi Xian's mind went blank. Gone? Just like that. On the other side, a figure suddenly flew out. The person who flew out was Lian Bixian. Yi Xian hurriedly trembled. He was about to help, but at this moment, a figure suddenly blocked in front of him. He knew this person. He was the dean of Firmament Academy, Qiu Yuan. Qiu Yuan looked coldly at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, do you still remember how mighty you were in my Firmament Academy?" "You." Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Qiu Yuan's expression changed drastically. He suddenly swung the black ruler in his hand forward, and an expanse of black ink light rippled out. However, it was slashed apart by Yi Xian's sword. Seeing this scene, Qiu Yuan was shocked. He hurriedly retreated. At this moment, more than a dozen true Imperial Realm experts surrounded him. Rumble! A series of explosions suddenly rang out in the sky. Then, Yi Xian retreated hundreds of feet away. Just as he was about to make a move, a burst of laughter suddenly came from the other side. As the laughter rang out, an earth-shattering explosion suddenly rang out. Yi Xian turned his head to look. Not far away in the sky, a beam of sword light shook the sky, and in the middle of that beam of sword light, it was Lian Bixian. At this moment, Lian Bixian was looking at Firmament Sword Sect below. His eyes were filled with reluctance and regret. Gradually, he completely disappeared in the sky. Yi Xian was stunned. As if he thought of something, he hurriedly turned around. Not far away, Gu Shaoxian and Yu Qi were being besieged by more than 20 true Imperial Realm experts. The two women were almost unable to hold on any longer. At this moment, Yu Qi suddenly looked in the direction of Yi Xian. She smiled. "Take care." As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed at the space between her eyebrows. In an instant, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from her body. Self-destruction. P.S. Ask for a ticket. End of this chapter. Chapter 339. Self-destruct. Against so many experts, Yu Qi and the rest had no way of contending against them. If they self-destructed, they could at least drag a few down with them. Therefore, Zhang Tai had no choice, Lian Bixian had no choice, and Yu Qi had no choice. Just as Yi Xian was about to self-destruct, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Yu Qi. He pressed down on Yu Qi's shoulder, and in an instant, a powerful sword will forcefully suppress the power that was about to explode from within Yu Qi's body. Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian and softly said, "Why bother?" Yi Xian shook his head and turned around. In front of him, there were more than 10 true Imperial Law Realm experts. Gradually, Yi Xian smiled. As he laughed, a powerful force suddenly rippled out of Yi Xian's body. When this force appeared, all of the strong people in the world looked at it one after another. On Yi Xian's brow, an illusory Xiao Ta quietly appeared. Prison Pagoda. When the prison pagoda appeared, the entire world changed, and the powerful pressure that was originally in the air instantly disappeared without a trace. In its place was a new pressure, the true might of heaven and earth. No, even the might of heaven and earth was not this terrifying. Everyone looked at Yi Xian in shock, or more accurately, at the illusory Xiao Ta on Yi Xian's brow. What treasure was this? Gradually, Yi Xian's expression became ferocious, and in the next instant he roared, "Withdraw!" As his voice fell, the more than 20 true Imperial Law Realm experts in front of Yi Xian suddenly disappeared, and when they reappeared, they were already in the prison pagoda. The more than 20 people looked around in shock. They were about to rush out, but at this time, a blood-red prison word suddenly appeared above their heads. As this word appeared, no one in the prison pagoda could move. At this moment, everyone was shocked. Very quickly, screams rang out from the first level of the prison pagoda. A moment later, all the experts in the first level of the World Prison Pagoda had disappeared without a trace. Outside the prison pagoda, Lu Supremacy and the others stared at Yi Xian in shock. At this moment, their hearts were in utter shock. More than 20 true defensive magic realm experts disappeared in front of them just like that. Everyone knew that this was Yi Xian's doing. Countless experts retreated, distancing themselves from Yi Xian. At this moment, when they looked at Yi Xian, their eyes were filled with deep fear. Lord Lu glared at Yi Xian. "How did you do it?" Yi Xian didn't answer. At this moment, his hands were trembling slightly, and his head was spinning. At this moment, he could already feel that something in the prison pagoda seemed to have loosened. He knew very well that the seal had loosened. Every time he used the World Prison Pagoda, the seal would loosen. Once the seal loosened, the existences within the World Prison Pagoda would come out. However, he had no other choice. Lord Lu stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "What exactly is that treasure of yours?" "A treasure." When they heard this word, the gazes of many people in the surroundings instantly burned slightly with desire. Yi Xian grinned. "Based on your gazes, it seems like you want that treasure." The others in the surroundings gazed at Yi Xian silently, but their gazes were sufficient to explain everything. Right at this moment, someone suddenly said, "Yi Xian, where did you take them?" Yi Xian gazed at that person and smiled. "Take a guess." That person's expression changed, and he was just about to speak when the left protector by Lu Supremacy's side spoke abruptly. "He's buying time. He's buying time on purpose. He definitely exhausted a huge amount of energy by activating that treasure first. He's at his weakest right now." When they heard the left protector, the fear in their eyes gradually turned icy cold as they gazed at Yi Xian. Suddenly, Lu Supremacy said, "Attack!" As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Obviously, he intended to attack himself. A wisp of a ferocious smile arose on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth, and he was about to attack. However, a ray of white light suddenly shot down from the horizon. The white light was extremely swift, and it instantly arrived in front of Yi Xian. The white light dispersed to reveal a woman in a white dress before Yi Xian. Anlanxio. Anlanxio took a step forward, and the space in front of her trembled violently as soon as it descended. After that, a formidable force surged out from that expanse of space in front of her. Bang! This force forcefully stopped Lu Supremacy on the spot. Lu Supremacy gazed at Anlanxio while his eyes narrowed slightly. "You're that expert from the Yin clan?" Anlanxio nodded. Lu Supremacy said in a low voice. "What? Your Yin clan intends to stand on the side of the Firmament Sword sect?" Anlanxio shook her head. "It's my own business, and it isn't related to the Yin clan." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure suddenly turned illusory. On the other hand, Lu Supremacy's expression changed abruptly, and then he suddenly slapped his palm forward. As soon as his palm descended, a formidable force swept out like a torrent from his palm. Meanwhile, Anlanxio arrived before him. She pointed out with a finger, and the space there trembled violently before rippling forward like a wave. Bang! The entire sky trembled violently, and then a figure retreated explosively repeatedly. It was Lu's supremacy. He lost again? Everyone in the surroundings gazed at Enlancio with slight disbelief. Where did this genius come from? Lu's supremacy glanced at his palm. At this moment, his palm had split apart, and fresh blood was flowing incessantly from it. After a short moment of silence, Lu's supremacy raised his head to gaze at Enlancio, who stood nearby, and he had a slightly complicated expression on his face. It really is the saying that geniuses appear in every generation. Enlancio paid no attention to Lu's supremacy. She turned around and walked over to Yi Xian, and she grinned as she gazed at Yi Xian's pale face. Long time no see. Long time no see. Yi Xian chuckled. You're much stronger than before. Enlancio chuckled. Aren't you the same? I just never imagined that you'd become someone that everyone in the world wants to kill. Yi Xian shook his head. You shouldn't have gotten involved in this. You'll drag your clan down with you. Enlancio spoke softly. That's quite estranged. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. All right, then I won't talk about it. Meanwhile, Lu's supremacy spoke abruptly. Miss En, does your clan know that you've done this? Enlancio turned around to gaze at Lu's supremacy. I've said it before. This is my own business, and it has nothing to do with the En clan. Lu's supremacy spoke solemnly. Since it's like that, then don't blame my Realm Defense Alliance for not giving the En clan any face. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand. Kill. Leave no one alive. As soon as Lord Lu's order resounded, the true defensive spell realm experts in the surroundings charged towards Yi Xian's group once more. Enlancio's face remained emotionless as she gazed at the experts that were charging over. She slowly clenched her right hand tightly, and suddenly, her figure seemed like a wisp of smoke that drifted away. In the next moment, numerous afterimages suddenly appeared in the distance. They were all afterimages of Enlancio. Numerous shrill cries resounded in the distance, and every single one of them represented the fall of a true Imperial Magical Realm expert. Lu's supremacy's face sank when he saw this scene. Enlancio's strength wasn't inferior to Yi Xian at all. After a moment of silence, Lu's supremacy turned to look to the side. Beside him, 3 golden-robed experts were charging towards Enlancio. 3 void-piercing realm experts. As these 3 experts attacked, Enlancio was instantly restrained. On the other hand, some experts in the surroundings charged towards Yi Xian. Right at this moment, Xiao Ling suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw Xiao Ling, and then he hurriedly said, It's dangerous. Go in quickly. Xiao Ling blinked and nodded. All right. As soon as she finished speaking, she ran back in. But it wasn't long before she ran out again. She gazed at Yi Xian, hesitated for a moment and said, I'll help you beat up a baddie. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and punched towards the distance. Bang! With this punch, a true defense Dharma realm expert that was hundreds of feet away was sent flying hundreds of feet away. Xiao Ling blinked when she witnessed this scene. She glanced at her fist, and then she gazed at Yi Xian. Am I that formidable? Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. No. He's too weak. He's too weak. As he spoke, he turned around and slashed down with his sword. The head of a true Imperial Magical Realm expert in the distance flew into the air. Yi Xian pointed at the head that had flown away. Look, isn't it because he's too weak? Xiao Ling blinked and was doubtful. Right at this moment, Exalt Lu suddenly spoke fiercely, the Quintessence Core. All the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance looked at Xiao Ling when they heard Exalt Lu. Meanwhile, Exalt Lu suddenly charged towards Xiao Ling. Xiao Ling shuddered, and then she turned around and ran into the pagoda. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. Little girl, are you trying to help me or harm me? Because along with the appearance of Xiao Ling, the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance had charged towards her. Just at this moment, Yu Qi blocked in front of Yi Xian. She was about to speak when Yi Xian pulled her behind him. Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, If I have to die, then let me die first. As he spoke, he charged out with his sword. Looking at Yi Xian charging out, Yu Qi's eyes gradually turned blank. In the distance, after Yi Xian charged out, he was instantly surrounded by a dozen true Imperial Magical Realm experts. Although he could instantly kill a true Imperial Magical Realm expert, it was still extremely difficult for him to fight a dozen of them at once. Although Tsong's sword sect had fewer people, They were all swordsmen and were extremely strong. Therefore, even if they were suppressed, they still had the strength to fight. About a quarter of an hour later, a powerful pressure suddenly appeared on the horizon again. Along with the appearance of this pressure, all the experts in the sky above Tsong World Sect stopped and raised their heads to look at the horizon. Very quickly, a shadow suddenly appeared in the horizon. Seeing this shadow, the experts from the Realm Defense Alliance were overjoyed. As for those from Tsong Sword Sect, their expressions became extremely solemn. Gradually, the shadow became more and more real. After 15 minutes, the shadow completely solidified. Then, a white-haired middle-aged man appeared in the sky. Master. Seeing this white-haired man, all the experts from the Realm Defense Alliance knelt down and said in unison, "Greetings, Master." Chapter 340. My Lord. Despair appeared in the eyes of countless Pale Sword Sect disciples when they saw the white-haired man. Earlier, although the Pale Sword Sect was suppressed, they could still fight. But now, along with the appearance of this white-haired man, everyone knew that there was no hope. There was no hope at all. At this moment, Yi Xian was at a loss. The white-haired man stood in midair without any aura. It was like he was one with the world and was unfathomable. The white-haired man had his hands behind his back as he looked down. His eyes were filled with indifference as if he was looking at an ant. At this moment the white-haired man suddenly said, "If the sword master of the Pale Sword Sect was still here, then he would barely have some consciousness." Unfortunately, as he spoke he shook his head slightly. "Didn't your Pale Sword Sect have a celestial slaying sword formation? Come, I'll give all of you a chance to activate the sword formation." It was confidence and also contempt. In the sky above the Pale Sword Sect, Chen Beihan swept the Pale Sword Sect with his gaze. Presently, the Pale Sword Sect was in a mess. A moment later, Chen Beihan spoke softly. "The future is unknown, but it's enough to try my best. Disciples of the Pale Sword Sect, listen up. Men can die, swords can break, but the backbone of my Pale Sword Sect can't be broken." As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot lightly and shot into the sky. Wang! A sword hum resounded through the sky. In the sky, the white-haired man's expression was calm. "Ant!" As soon as he finished speaking, his right hand pressed down lightly. A golden beam of light descended from the sky, and when the sword light came into contact with the golden beam of light, it was instantly transformed into nothingness. After the sword light disappeared, Chen Beihan roared with laughter. "Bring it on!" As soon as he finished speaking, his stomach suddenly swelled up. In the next moment, bang! A deafening explosion resounded in the sky, and then a powerful force suddenly exploded in the sky. Everywhere this force passed, space trembled as if it was about to shatter. It was extremely shocking. Self-destruction. Chen Beihan was a peak expert, so how terrifying was the force of his self-destruction? A powerful force swept towards the white-haired man. It was simply apocalyptic. On the other hand, the white-haired man's expression was still calm. When the energy arrived before him, he stretched out his right hand and pressed it down lightly. This press seemed like the entire sky had sunk down, and a shapeless pressure directly crushed the energy. The sky regained its calm. Seeing this scene, countless experts in the surroundings were shocked. The Supreme Realm. This is definitely a Supreme Realm. So strong, this Pale Sword Sect is doomed today. The Azure Sword Sect and this Yi Xian are truly overestimating themselves. On the other side, all the Ashen Sword Sect disciples had grief and indignation on their faces. Besides grief and indignation, there was also despair. Chen Beihan's self-destruct attack had been easily blocked. An expert of this level was like a god to everyone. At the side, Yi Xian was silent. He knew that against a powerhouse of this level, even if he summoned the pagoda, it would be of no use. It was not that the pagoda wasn't strong enough, it was that he himself wasn't strong enough. He was truly helpless against such an expert. Right at this moment, Jian Xian suddenly walked towards the white-haired man. Everyone looked at Jian Xian, and the white-haired man's gaze descended onto Jian Xian as well. As he gazed at Jian Xian, the white-haired man spoke indifferently. "You aren't bad. Unfortunately, you're still too weak." Jian Xian spoke indifferently. "Is that so?" As he spoke, he suddenly formed a seal with his hand, and then he tapped the space between his brows. A sword howl resounded abruptly in the sky, and then an illusory sword suddenly appeared between the sword immortal's brows under the gazes of countless people. Xueqi, who stood by Yi Xian's side, spoke with slight disbelief. One with the sword. One with the sword? Yi Xian gazed at Xueqi. What's one with the sword? Xueqi spoke in a low voice. It's a realm in the sword Dao above the great sword immortal realm. I never expected that eldest senior brother would have actually cultivated it successfully. As she spoke, she raised her head to look at Jian Xian in the sky, and her brows knit together tightly. In midair, the white-haired man's brows knit together slightly as well, but he quickly relaxed. One with a sword. No, it isn't true one with the sword. However, it's extremely rare. If you're given 10 years of time, then perhaps you'll really be able to fight me. Unfortunately, you're too weak now. Jian Xian raised his head and looked directly at the white-haired man. In the next moment, the aura within his body rose explosively. At the same time, a strand of sword intent shot into the sky. Xueqi's countenance instantly turned pale when he witnessed this scene. The white-haired man stared fixedly at Jian Xian. You're improving your cultivation regardless of the consequences. Looks like you're prepared to die. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed downwards. An expanse of space suddenly split open, and then an enormous finger emerged from within it. As soon as this enormous finger appeared, the entire space in the sky became illusory. The energy contained within it caused this expanse of space to be slightly unable to endure it. Jian Xian suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky, and everywhere it passed, space was actually directly torn apart. Under the gazes of countless people, this ray of light slashed directly onto the enormous finger. Bang! The entire sky trembled violently while the enormous finger rumbled and shattered. After that, a sword arrived before the white-haired man. The white-haired man stretched out his right hand, and his palm forcefully blocked Jian Xian's attack. Jian Xian suddenly shouted furiously, "Break!" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly spun his sword forward. Meanwhile, the white-haired man smashed his left hand forward. Bang! With a single punch, the sword shattered, and Jian Xian was blasted flying. Jian Xian flew over 1 kilometer away, but he hadn't even stopped when the white-haired man suddenly appeared in front of him, and then a palm pressed against Jian Xian's stomach. In an instant, Jian Xian's entire body became illusory. The white-haired man gazed calmly at Jian Xian. Do you feel the strength of my palm? This is the difference between a god and an ant. Understand? As soon as he finished speaking, he withdrew his right hand, and Jian Xian's body gradually became illusory. When he was about to vanish completely, he suddenly spoke softly. Master, I'm useless. It didn't take long for Jian Xian to vanish completely. Jian Xian had died in battle. And now, there were only 6 true Imperial Dharma Realm experts on the Pale Sword sect side. Among the Pale Mountain's 6 sword immortals, only Xueqi, Gu Shaoxian, and Cong Xian were left. Among them, Cong Xian was seriously injured. The Pale Sword sect was defeated. They were defeated without any suspense. All around, everyone looked at Yi Xian below. Everyone knew that the monster in front of them would die prematurely today. And in a year or two, no one would remember who Yi Xian was. In the air, the white-haired man looked at Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian and nodded slightly. You're a sword immortal at such a young age, and you've even reached the true Imperial Dharma realm. Your talent is even better than Jian Xian's. As he spoke, he looked around. I heard that there's an expert behind you. You can call her out. I want to see her. At this moment, Lin Songyun, who was beside Yi Xian, suddenly stood up. He looked at the white-haired man. Sir, believe me, you don't want to see her. The white-haired man looked at Lin Songyun indifferently. Spirit Void Star Palace? Lin Songyun nodded. That's right. The white-haired man said calmly. I've heard of it before. Lin Songyun shook his head with a smile. It seems that you haven't heard much. The white-haired man retracted his gaze. He scanned the surroundings before his eyes landed on Yi Xian. Why, she still doesn't want to come out? A mysterious woman. Yi Xian chuckled. The next moment, he suddenly soared into the sky, sword in hand, and slashed at the white-haired man. Seeing that Yi Xian had actually attacked, the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance immediately revealed looks of mockery. In the air, the white-haired man gently pressed down with his right hand. With this pressure, Yi Xian, who had just charged out, was directly pushed back to the ground. Boom! The ground beneath Yi Xian's feet trembled violently, and then it split apart. The white-haired man pointed a finger at Yi Xian. The space above Yi Xian suddenly split apart, and then a ray of golden light shot forward and blasted towards Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Lin Songyun suddenly appeared above Yi Xian, and then he swiftly swung his palm. Bang! Lin Songyun and Yi Xian were both blasted back repeatedly. After they stopped moving, a wisp of blood instantly seeped out from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. The white-haired man was about to attack again when Enlancio suddenly appeared in front of him. The latter glanced at Enlancio, and then a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. I never expected that besides Yi Xian, you're actually such a monstrous genius as well. Enlancio didn't speak. She suddenly vanished, and in the next moment, she was already in front of the white-haired man. However, she didn't even see the white-haired man attack, yet Enlancio had directly retreated 300 m back. The white-haired man was just about to attack again when an old man suddenly appeared in front of Enlancio. The old man bowed slightly to the white-haired man. I'm the patriarch of the An clan, An Zitian. My An clan has no intention of becoming enemies with the Realm Defense Alliance, so I hope that you can show mercy. The white-haired man glanced at An Zitian. Too late. As soon as he finished speaking, he smashed his fist forward. The old man's expression changed drastically, and he placed his palms together before suddenly blasting them forward. This blast caused the space in front of him to tremble. Bang! The space around the old man collapsed, causing his expression to change drastically, and he hurriedly pulled Enlancio along as he retreated repeatedly. The white-haired man paid no attention to the old man and Enlancio, and he gazed at Yi Xian. Since she won't show herself, then I won't waste any more time. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and then a formidable force suddenly blasted towards Yi Xian. This force was so formidable that it wasn't something that Yi Xian could resist at this moment. However, Yi Xian didn't resign himself to death. He had a savage expression on his face and was prepared to fight desperately. Meanwhile, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Xueqi. Xueqi suddenly slashed her sword forward, and a ray of sword light slashed down fiercely like a bolt of lightning. Bang! The sword instantly shattered into pieces, whereas Xueqi's figure had already appeared 300 m away. After she stopped moving, her body directly shattered apart. Yi Xian's mind instantly went blank when he witnessed this scene. In the distance, the white-haired man spoke indifferently. "Hant!" As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack again. However, Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, and then a formidable pressure suddenly appeared in the heavens and the earth. An illusory Shao Ta silently condensed between Yi Xian's brows. A horrified voice suddenly resounded from within the pagoda. It can't be activated. However, Yi Xian didn't care anymore. The prison pagoda within his body was trembling violently, and every single level was trembling as if something was vanishing. Outside, Yi Xian's body was twitching violently, and he was bleeding from all 7 apertures. It was an extremely shocking sight. Within the prison pagoda, powerful pressure suddenly appeared, and it was so strong that it was even stronger than the Realm Defense Alliance. It was countless times stronger than the Lord. Ha ha! Suddenly, roaring laughter resounded from within the pagoda. Right at this moment, the rightmost sword at the top of the prison pagoda suddenly trembled violently, and then a ray of sword light shook down from the top of the pagoda. In an instant, the entire prison pagoda returned to calm. Only the sword at the top of the pagoda was still trembling lightly, emitting a deep sword cry as if it was responding to something. P.S. I don't need tickets today. I'm begging for a girl. Chapter 341. Within the prison pagoda, all auras disappeared and everything returned to normal. It was abnormally calm. Outside the prison pagoda, Yi Xian had also gradually regained his composure. In the air, the white-haired man stared at Yi Xian with a serious look in his eyes. What was that thing between your eyebrows just now? Yi Xian ignored the white-haired man. He looked up at the sky and said softly, Have you arrived? The white-haired man followed Yi Xian's gaze and looked up. There was nothing there. At this time, his expression suddenly changed. He looked down and saw a woman in a plain dress had appeared in front of Yi Xian. Everyone was stunned, because no one knew how the woman had appeared. Not far away, Supreme Lord Lu's face became unprecedentedly serious when he saw this woman. A mysterious woman. She had finally appeared. Below, everyone's eyes fell on the woman. Lin Songyun hurriedly walked in front of the woman and bowed deeply. "Greetings, senior." The woman in the plain dress did not respond to anyone. She just looked at Yi Xian indifferently. But gradually, her eyes softened. After a long time she said softly, "It's you." Obviously she was sure. Yi Xian pointed not far away. There, a soul was quietly floating. It was Yu Qi's soul. Yi Xian said softly, "Can you save him?" The plainly dressed woman glanced at Yu Qi. And at this time, the nearby Lin Songyun suddenly smiled bitterly. Little friend Yi, her fleshly body was destroyed. Although her soul was left behind, this soul is illusory and her consciousness has already vanished. Her life imprint is already gone. So, he didn't say anything else. Yi Xian didn't speak. He just looked at the woman. The woman looked at Yi Xian. "Her life or death has nothing to do with me." Yi Xian said solemnly, "She did it to save me." The woman turned to look at Yu Qi's soul in the distance when she heard this. After a moment of silence, she raised her right hand lightly, and Yu Qi's soul floated directly into her palm. She looked at Yu Qi's soul in her palm with an expressionless face. "Condense." As soon as she finished speaking, many specks of light suddenly gathered in her hand. Seeing this scene, Lin Songyun, who was not far away, was shocked and took several steps back. A person had a life imprint. Once the life imprint was broken, it meant the end of that person. But now, the woman in the plain dress had actually forcefully condensed this leaping life mark. This kind of method was already inhuman. After the woman in a plain dress condensed Yu Qi's soul, she pressed her right hand lightly against Yi Xian's chest, and the soul directly entered the World Prison Pagoda. Within the World Prison Pagoda, a strand of sword light enveloped Yu Qi's soul. With this strand of sword light protecting him, it could be said that he was impervious to all evils. Within the World Prison Pagoda, Xiao Linger gazed curiously at Yu Qi's soul. But it didn't take long for her to gaze at the woman outside the World Prison Pagoda, and her eyes shone with stars. Outside the World Prison Pagoda, the woman gazed at Yi Xian's chest for a long time. In the end, she said softly, "She's doing this to suppress that pagoda, right?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The woman fell silent for a moment, and then she said, "Do you know what this pagoda is?" Yi Xian shook his head. The woman nodded slightly. "It's good that you don't know. It wouldn't make much sense for you to know now." As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian. "This pagoda is extraordinary, so it might not necessarily be a good thing for it to fall into your possession. However, since it's already in your possession, then there's no need to avoid it." Yi Xian nodded. "All right." The woman glanced at the surroundings. "Are they all people who want to kill you?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The woman looked at Yi Xian and spoke indifferently. "What do you think?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, "If you're too outstanding, others will be jealous of you." The woman glanced at Yi Xian. "You're quite thick-skinned." On the other side, the left protector of the Realm Defense Alliance spoke abruptly. "I presume you're the sword immortal behind Yi Xian. The old man thought that you wouldn't appear." "You?" Right at this moment, the woman suddenly turned around, and in the next moment, a ray of sword light pierced through the center of the left protector's forehead. Chi! The left protector's body stiffened. Everyone was dumbstruck. The woman looked at the stiff left protector with an emotionless expression. "We're talking, so why are you interrupting?" The left protector stared blankly at the woman. Even in death, his eyes were filled with disbelief, because he still hadn't figured out how he'd died. On the other hand, everyone in the surroundings had their guards up. The woman's strength caused them to be grateful to the point of fear. At this time, the white-haired man in the air suddenly looked at Yi Xian. "I remember now." The white-haired man in front of Yi Xian stared at Yi Xian. "That pagoda on your forehead. It's an item on the Interstellar Bounty Board." Interstellar Bounty Board. Hearing the white-haired man's words, Lin Songyun's face changed. He looked at Yi Xian. "Little friend, that item of yours?" Yi Xian laughed bitterly. "I don't know what it is either." Lin Songyun spoke in a low voice. "If it's really an item on the Interstellar Bounty Board, then little friend, you must be careful. Because anything that can be on the interstellar bounty board is definitely a treasure of heaven and earth. If little friend's item is ranked first, if news of this gets out, little friend... As he spoke up to hear, he seemed to have thought of something. He glanced at the woman and did not speak further. With this woman by Yi Xian's side, there wouldn't be any problems. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. How could he not understand Lin Songyun's meaning? Since the World Prison Pagoda appeared today, there would definitely be a lot of trouble in the future. In the air, the white-haired man looked at Yi Xian. I didn't expect that you actually have such a treasure on you. This is a bargain for me. A bargain for you? The woman glanced at the white-haired man. What kind of trash are you? Hearing the woman's words, everyone was stunned. She actually dared to ask the alliance leader what kind of trash was he. In the air, the white-haired man stared at the woman. It seems like you are very confident. As he spoke, he clasped his hands behind his back and looked down at the woman. Come, let me see exactly what gives you such confidence. The woman suddenly appeared in front of the white-haired man. She stared at him. You are so weak that you don't even have the thought of making me draw my sword. As the sound of her voice faded, she lightly stomped her right foot. Boom! The spectators watched as the white-haired man retreated explosively by over 3 kilometers. All the spectators were dumbstruck by this scene. At this moment, the white-haired man who was 3 kilometers away felt slight disbelief as well. Because his body had actually started to crack apart. At this moment, he finally realized how terrifying this woman before him was. The white-haired man stared fixedly at the woman and was about to speak. However, the woman suddenly vanished once more. The white-haired man's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly slapped his right palm forward. Rumble! The entire sky trembled violently. Meanwhile, a figure was blasted flying. It was the white-haired man. At this moment, his arms had vanished. The faces of Exalt Lu and the others instantly turned pale when they witnessed this scene. The woman gazed calmly at the white-haired man. I didn't kill you because I was afraid you wouldn't realize how weak you are. Do you understand now? The white-haired man stared fixedly at the woman. Who exactly are you? The woman didn't speak, and she lightly stomped her right foot once more. In the distance, the white-haired man's expression changed abruptly. In the next moment, he roared furiously, and a powerful force swept out from his body. However, the force shattered as soon as it appeared. Bang! Under the gazes of everyone, the white-haired man retreated repeatedly, and in the process, his body started to crack inch by inch. Over 1 kilometer away, the white-haired man's body had vanished, and only his soul remained. The woman glanced at the white-haired man. Do you realize how weak you are? The white-haired man's eyes were slightly dazed. Obviously, the woman's strength had far exceeded his expectations. On the other hand, the woman didn't kill the white-haired man right away. She walked slowly towards him. Meanwhile, the white-haired man suddenly looked at her. In the next moment, he opened his palm, and a speck of light shot into the sky and shot into the boundless starry sky. The woman stopped moving, glanced at the starry sky and spoke indifferently. You finally called for help? The white-haired man's expression was slightly unsightly. You're intentionally waiting for me to call for help. The plain-clothed woman was expressionless. To kill, we naturally have to kill them all. Hearing her words, the faces of the surrounding experts fell, and some turned around to leave. At this time, everyone knew that the Realm Protection Alliance was finished. Kill Yi Xian? Now, they no longer had this thought in their minds. All they could think of now was to escape. Right at this moment, the nearby woman in a plain dress suddenly flicked her finger, and then a ray of sword light silently appeared at the end of the horizon. Chi 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 chi. The heads of 6 or 7 true defensive Dharma realm experts flew out. Seeing this, the rest of the people immediately stopped on the spot, not daring to move. The plainly dressed woman glanced at the people around her. Did I say you could leave? Hearing what was said, everyone's expression changed. Among them, the Dean of Blue Waves Academy, Qiu Yuan, suddenly stood up. He slightly bowed towards the woman in plain skirt and said, Senior I. The plainly dressed woman suddenly looked at Qiu Yuan. Did I allow you to speak? As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her jade-like hand gently. Chi! Qiu Yuan's head flew off and blood spurted out like a fountain. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed. One after another, they rapidly retreated, but they didn't dare to leave. In the sky, the plainly dressed woman had her hands behind her back. She looked at the starry sky, and after a moment, as if she thought of something, she turned around and looked at Yi Xian, who was not far away. To be precise, she was looking at the prison pagoda within Yi Xian's body. Looking at the 3 swords at the top of the pagoda, a trace of ripple appeared in her eyes. Clearly, she seemed to have recalled something. At this moment, in the starry sky, a powerful aura quietly condensed. Immediately after, an illusory figure suddenly appeared in the sky above Blue Sword Sect. Before that illusory figure could condense, the plainly dressed woman waved her right hand. An array of sword light flashed across the sky. Chi! That illusory figure directly shattered. The plainly dressed woman raised her head and looked at the depths of the starry sky. Too weak. Send someone who can fight. Chapter 342. Too weak. There was complete silence. Even the white-robed man's face was filled with shock. Right now he was truly afraid. He hadn't expected the woman in the plain dress to be so powerful. The white-robed man wasn't the only one who hadn't expected this. Everyone present, including Yi Xian, hadn't expected the woman in the plain dress to be so terrifying. Because he'd never had a clear idea of the woman's strength. He didn't know how powerful she was either. At that moment, a voice suddenly came from the depths of the starry sky. Who are you? Why have you come to the never-ending starfield? The woman in the plain dress glanced at the starry sky. I'm about to die. Why bother? As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her right hand. In an instant, the surrounding wind suddenly gathered in her palm. Soon, a water-like sword appeared in her palm. The next moment, the sword shot up into the sky and into the vast starry sky. A moment later, a scream suddenly rang out in the distant starry sky. Then, a bloody head slowly fell from the starry sky. Somewhere in the starry sky, a horrified voice suddenly rang out. She's the mysterious woman who's been rampaging through the starry sky. She's already killed more than 20 interstellar enforcers and interstellar officials. It's her. Why did she come to the never-ending starfield? She went to the Azure world. That's the territory of the Realm Defense Alliance. The Realm Defense Alliance is in big trouble now. Do you still care? The Realm Defense Alliance hands over a large number of purple origin crystals every year. How? Are we going to die? This person is so contemptuous of the never-ending starfield. Are we just going to let her? As soon as he said that, a sword beam suddenly flashed in the space in front of him. The next moment, his head flew into the air. The other person next to him was stunned. Then, he hurriedly bowed deeply. Senior, please do as you wish. We will not interfere in the affairs of the Realm Defense Alliance. After saying that, he bowed deeply again. After a moment of silence, a voice suddenly rang out in front of him. Scram! That person hurriedly turned around and disappeared. The Azure world. The woman in the plain dress withdrew her gaze and looked at the white-haired man who was not far away. The white-haired man who was already a soul body stared fixedly at her, and was just about to speak when a strand of sword light suddenly pierced through the space between his brows. The white-haired man was stared at by the sword and was unable to move. The sword seemed to have some sort of strange power that was constantly devouring the white-haired man. The white-haired man said in horror, What are you doing? The woman waved her right hand, and the white-haired man's body suddenly turned into a ball of white light and appeared in her palm. In the next moment, she turned around and lightly made a seal towards Yi Xian. The white light directly entered the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. This. Yi Xian was a little confused. The woman in the plain dress said indifferently, Your soul is on the weak side. This is for you. Yi Xian was speechless. After the white light entered his body, Yi Xian immediately felt a powerful force enter his body. Then, his whole body began to tremble. Devouring a soul. Not far away, Lin Songyun looked at Yi Xian with slight envy. This white-haired man was extremely strong. How terrifying would the soul of such a person be? Yi Xian had devoured the white-haired man's soul. It was obvious to how strong Yi Xian's soul had become. At this moment, the woman in the plain dress suddenly turned around and looked at the surroundings. When they saw the woman in the plain dress looking over, the expressions of those people changed drastically. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. Retreat. Not far away, High Lord Lu suddenly walked out and bowed slightly. Senior, we are willing. Before he could finish speaking, a sword had already pierced through his throat. Hiss. Fresh blood sprayed out from High Lord Lu's throat like a fountain, and he stared fixedly at the woman in the plain dress. The woman in the plain dress was expressionless. Today, no one who wants to kill him will live. As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed with a finger, and a strand of sword light shot out. In an instant, shrill cries resounded incessantly in the surroundings. Bloody heads flew out one after another, and the scene was extremely bloody. In next to no time, the heads of a few dozen true Imperial Dharma realm experts had been removed. On the other hand, Yi Xian, who was devouring, seemed to have thought of something, and he hurriedly pointed with his finger. The oblivion ring on his finger instantly flew out, and in an instant, those true Imperial Dharma realm experts in the surroundings transformed into strands of energy that converged towards the oblivion ring. The woman in the plain dress glanced at Yi Xian, but she didn't speak. At this moment, only the members of the Pale Sword sect remained in the surroundings. As if she'd thought of something, the woman suddenly appeared within the pagoda of prison within Yi Xian's body. She arrived at the top of the pagoda, and she fell silent as she gazed at the three swords at the top of the pagoda. Meanwhile, Xiao Linger suddenly floated over to the woman in the plain dress. The woman glanced at Xiao Linger, and Xiao Linger grinned brilliantly before he pointed at the three swords before him. The woman pointed at the sword on the far right, and then she said, "It's mine." Xiao Linger blinked, and then she pointed at the other two swords. The woman in the plain dress said softly, "It's from two old friends." After saying that, she brought Xiao Linger to the second floor. Inside the second floor, the great god on the second floor was exuding a powerful force. The woman in the plain dress gently pressed her right hand down, and the force exuding from the great god on the second floor immediately rushed back into his body. After a moment, the great god on the second floor opened his eyes. He looked at the woman in the plain dress and said softly, "Thank you." The woman in the plain dress said softly, "I've promised you before." The great god on the second floor nodded, but he didn't speak. The woman in the plain dress glanced at the great god on the second floor. "You're free." The great god on the second floor nodded, and was about to leave when the woman in the plain dress suddenly said, "You should know about this pagoda." The great god on the second floor hesitated, and then said softly, "I know a little." The woman in the plain dress said calmly, "This thing is not simple. If it falls on him, although it represents countless troubles, it is also a great opportunity. Do you understand what I mean?" The great god on the second floor was silent. The woman in the plain dress said again, "With your ability, one more floor is your limit. If you stay in this pagoda, you can use this pagoda to have unlimited possibilities in the future. Of course, everything is up to you." The great god on the second floor glanced at the woman in the plain dress. "With you here, he will not be in danger." The woman in the plain dress shook her head. "This is not my body, and this pagoda is sealed." The expression of the great god on the second floor was a little solemn, because Yi Xian had forcibly activated this pagoda before, and the seal in this pagoda could be said to be in pieces. The great god on the second floor said in a low voice, "You can directly kill them, can't you?" The woman in the plain dress looked up and shook her head. "This pagoda has been connected to his divine soul. They live and die as one. If you kill the people in the pagoda, the seal will definitely be broken, and if the seal is broken by force, he will be hurt." The great god on the second floor understood. The woman in the plain dress was not worried about the people in the pagoda, but the pagoda. The woman in the plain dress looked at the great god on the second floor. "Think about it yourself." After saying that, she left the pagoda. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Outside the pagoda, Yi Xian was still frantically devouring, and the aura around his body was getting stronger and stronger, to the point that he could not hold on at this moment. Seeing this scene, the woman in the plain dress suddenly pressed her right hand on the top of Yi Xian's head. The next moment, a sword intent penetrated into Yi Xian's body, and soon, the aura around Yi Xian gradually calmed down. The woman in the plain dress retracted her hand and said softly, "Your soul has been strengthened, but there is still a lot of soul power and the energy you just absorbed in your body. Your body can't completely absorb them now, so I have suppressed them in your body, and you can slowly absorb them in the future." Yi Xian nodded. "Understood." After saying that, he slowly clenched his hands. At this moment, he felt that his body was full of strength, especially his soul, because the current him could already feel his own soul. However, He still did not understand much about the soul. The woman in the plain dress looked at Yi Xian, and as she looked, her expression gradually became a little complicated. Yi Xian said softly, "Senior, what do you think of me?" The woman in the plain dress turned to glance at the surroundings, and after a short moment, she looked at Yi Xian and said softly, "I'm very worried about the pagoda within your body." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Senior, what exactly is this pagoda?" The woman in the plain dress shook her head. "This pagoda is extraordinary, and even I am unable to see through it. When I encountered it in the starry sky, I only knew that it imprisoned supreme experts of the heavens and the earth. According to my guess, it should be from a certain world." When she spoke up to hear, she did not continue. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What is it from a certain world?" The woman said softly, "You are still very weak now, and it is not beneficial for you to know some things about Dao Yi." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Look, I am already a sword immortal, and I am not weak." The woman pointed at the horizon. "Do you know how big this world is?" Yi Xian shook his head. The woman pointed at Yi Xian's abdomen. "Do you know how strong those existences imprisoned in the pagoda are?" Yi Xian shook his head. The woman said softly, "Did you see that white-haired man from before?" Yi Xian nodded. "Very strong." The woman spoke indifferently. "All the existences imprisoned in your pagoda are much stronger than that white-haired man." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly said, "The great god on the second floor is so strong as well?" The woman nodded. "Her strength hasn't fully recovered. Otherwise, no one in this world would be able to stop her." When she spoke up to hear, she looked at Yi Xian. "Besides her, the few existences above are stronger than you can imagine." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "Can I kill them?" The woman nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian was delighted in his heart, and he hurriedly said, "Kill all of them. Especially that fellow on the fourth floor. He is extremely bad." The woman continued, "I can kill them, but you have to die as well." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, "Why?" The woman spoke indifferently. "They are still within the seal, and they are trapped and protected by the seal. If I want to kill them, then I have to break the seal by force. The seal is one with the pagoda, and you are one with the pagoda. Breaking the seal will cause damage to the pagoda, and you will definitely die." When she spoke up to hear, she said softly, "So I can only seal them." "Don't you dare!" Right at this moment, a furious howl suddenly resounded from within the pagoda. In an instant, Yi Xian's head seemed to have suffered a heavy blow, and he fell to the ground. P.S. I have to keep a low profile for now. End of this chapter. Chapter 343. The moment Yi Xian fell, a hand pressed down on his shoulder. It was the woman's hand. The woman looked at Yi Xian's abdomen. In the next moment, she entered Yi Xian's body. At this moment, within Yi Xian's body, the world prison pagoda was shaking. As the woman entered, the world prison pagoda returned to normal. The woman stood on top of the world prison pagoda. She looked down at the world prison pagoda and laughed coldly. "I don't dare. If it wasn't for him, I would have killed all of you." As she spoke, she stamped her right foot. Bang! The entire world prison pagoda shook violently. Outside the world prison pagoda, Yi Xian felt the world spinning around him. Inside the pagoda, the woman looked down at the world prison pagoda expressionlessly. "A bunch of trash." Inside the world prison pagoda, the voice rang out again. "Woman, what are you being so arrogant for? If it wasn't for the fact that you were suppressed by this pagoda for thousands of years, I would have killed you with one hand." The woman said softly, "If you aren't trash, why would you be suppressed? If it wasn't for the fear of hurting him, I would have killed all of you today." As she spoke, she left the world prison pagoda. Inside the world prison pagoda, roars rang out one after another. "Damn woman, the day I leave the world prison pagoda will be the day you and this ant die." Outside the world prison pagoda, Yi Xian's face was filled with black lines. "Ant? Was she talking about him?" The woman looked at Yi Xian. "Did you feel it?" Yi Xian nodded. The woman said softly, "What do you think?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I don't think so." The woman said, "Walk with me." As she spoke, she turned and walked into the distance. Yi Xian followed. On the way, the woman walked slowly. She didn't speak and just walked quietly. Yi Xian didn't speak either. At a riverside, the two of them walked down the river. After a long while, the woman in the plain dress sat down on a rock. Yi Xian was standing quietly next to her. She looked at the distant horizon and said softly, "Do you know how long I've been searching for you?" Yi Xian was taken aback. "Looking for me?" The plain-dressed woman turned to look at Yi Xian, and a hint of worry flashed in her eyes. "You have a great treasure on you, but your strength is weak. My main body is too far away from this world, or perhaps, I'm no longer in this universe." When she spoke up to this point, she lightly shook her head and softly said, "As for that pagoda of yours, that pagoda is extraordinary as well. If those existences within the pagoda come out, they will definitely not let you go." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I'm still in a terrible situation." The plain-dressed woman stood up. She opened her palm and a wisp of sword light suddenly floated out. The sword light floated into the starry sky and then disappeared into the depths of the starry sky. "What's that?" Yi Xian was puzzled. The woman in the plain dress said softly, "Contact two old friends, as well as my main body and clone. If they see this strand of sword light, they will come and help you deal with the danger of the tower in your body. As for my main body and my clone, I can't sense them anymore." As she spoke up to this point, she solemnly said, "You must remember to work hard to become stronger. This pagoda is an enormous fortune, but I can sense that it's also an enormous karma. If your strength isn't enough, then you won't have the fortune to possess it. Understand?" Yi Xian nodded. "Understood." When he spoke up to this point, he hesitated for a moment and said softly, "Are you leaving?" The plain-dressed woman smiled lightly. "Sort of." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly tapped the center of Yi Xian's forehead with a finger. In an instant, the rightmost sword at the top of the pagoda trembled violently. In the next moment, a wisp of sword light suddenly poured down from the top of the pagoda. A hysterical voice suddenly resounded from within the pagoda. "Damnable woman! Do you think that you can protect him forever? Do you think that you... Can you? You..." The voice gradually weakened until it disappeared completely. Outside the pagoda, the plain-dressed woman's figure gradually became illusory. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was stunned, then he hurriedly said, You want to transform into sword chi like before to suppress this pagoda?" The plain-dressed woman nodded. Yi Xian said softly, "Why are you so good to me?" The plain-dressed woman smiled but didn't speak. Just like that, her body gradually became illusory. Just as she was about to completely disappear, she lightly touched Yi Xian's cheek. "Live well. You must live well. Understand?" As soon as she finished speaking, she completely disappeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian stood in place for a very, very long time. Within the pagoda, as the wisp of sword light seeped into the pagoda, the entire pagoda became completely silent. The pagoda regained its calm once more. After a long time, Yi Xian turned and left. Yi Xian returned to Pale Sword Sect. At this moment, Pale Sword Sect was in a mess. Besides that, it could be said that 90% of the true Law Realm experts of Azure Firmament World had been lost today. As for the Realm Defense Alliance, they had been completely annihilated. Not a single one of them had won. In the distance, Anlancio and Anzitian walked over. Anzitian sized up Yi Xian, smiled slightly, and didn't say anything. Anlancio walked in front of Yi Xian and said softly, "I'm leaving." "Returning to the An family?" Yi Xian asked. Anlancio shook her head. "Leaving the Azure Firmament World." Yi Xian was stunned. Leaving the Azure Firmament World. Beside Anlancio, Anzitian smiled and said, "Above the Azure Firmament World, in other words, in the stellar domain, there is an academy called God Academy. It is the best academy in our never-ending stellar domain." Little An received an invitation. This is an opportunity for her. God Academy. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "Can I go too?" Anzitian smiled and said, "With your talent, you can naturally go." Yi Xian smiled and said, "All right. If there is a chance, I will go and take a look." Anzitian smiled faintly and didn't say anything. He naturally wouldn't interfere in the matter between Yi Xian and Anlancio because Yi Xian was sufficiently outstanding. Moreover, Yi Xian obviously had a great power behind him. Anlancio said softly in front of Yi Xian, "See you later." With that, She turned around and was about to leave. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait." And Lan Xiu turned around, and Yi Xian hurriedly took out a spear and passed it to her. This spear was none other than incineration. A superior grade heaven rank spear. Yi Xian grinned. "I obtained it by chance. I'll give it to you." And Lan Xiu glanced at the spear and didn't refuse it. She put away incineration and played with it lightly before looking at Yi Xian. "Good spear." Yi Xian smiled and said, "It's good that you like it." And Lan Xiu nodded slightly. "I like it." As she spoke, she glanced at Yi Xian and said, "The profound path has already recommended Yi Ling to God's first academy." With that, she turned around and left. And Zaitian glanced at Yi Xian and hesitated for a moment before he said, "If young friend wants to reconstruct Sword Immortal Yuqi's body, then it's best to make a trip to God's first academy. Because it should be able to reconstruct Sword Immortal Yuqi's body there." Yi Xian said seriously, "Thank you for telling me." And Zaitian smiled lightly. "Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished into the horizon. He's gone. God's first academy. Yi Xian silently committed this academy to memory. Yi Xian turned around and walked over to Gu Shaoxian, who was sitting there silently. Her eyes were listless, and it was unknown what she was thinking. Yi Xian walked over to Gu Shaoxian and said softly, "Martial Aunt Gu." Gu Shaoxian looked at Yi Xian and said, "From now on, you are the sect leader of Blue Sword Sect." With that, she turned around and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Martial Aunt Gu, are you leaving Blue Sword Sect?" Gu Shaoxian stopped and said softly, "This is my home, I want to protect them." With that, she walked into the distance. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he walked over to Zhang Xian, who was not far away. Zhang Xian shook his head and said softly, "They're all gone, all gone." Yi Xian was silent. Although Blue Sword Sect had won, many people in Blue Sword Sect were no longer there. Chen Beihan, Jian Xian, Lian Bixian, Zhan Tai. Yi Xian stood on the spot for a long time. Suddenly, his gaze swept across the surroundings. "Pass down my order. All Blue Sword Sect disciples are to gather." As Yi Xian's voice faded, the surrounding Blue Sword Sect disciples quickly gathered. There were less than 100 people left in Blue Sword Sect. Less than 100. These were the last people in Blue Sword Sect. Yi Xian turned to face the crowd and said softly, "Is this over?" Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the sky. "This is not over. Today, all those who came to destroy my Blue Sword Sect deserve to die. Go." With that, Yi Xian brought Yi Xian to the Frost North Sect. When Yi Xian brought over 100 Blue Sword Sect disciples to the Frost North Sect, the expressions of everyone in the Frost North Sect changed drastically. Obviously, they already knew about what happened in Blue Sword Sect. Outside the Frost North Sect, an old lady walked in front of Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian and said softly, "Yi Xian, my Frost North Sect." At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. The next moment, the old lady's head was sent flying. Yi Xian was expressionless. "Kill." As the sound of his voice faded, he directly rushed out. Behind him, over 100 Blue Sword Sect disciples also rushed out. Revenge. To Yi Xian. He would not let a single one of the forces that went to help the Blue Sword Sect of the Realm Defense Alliance off. And this Frost North Sect was only the first. Soon, screams rang out from within the Frost North Sect. Soon, countless cultivators of the Frost North Sect started to escape. But no one was faster than Yi Xian's sword. In the entire firmament world, there were not many who could stop Yi Xian. About an hour later, Yi Xian and the others stopped. All the cultivators in the Frost North Sect had been slaughtered. No, there was still one more. In front of the main hall of the Frost North Sect, Yi Xian held his sword and pointed it at the ground. Not far from him, there were over a dozen girls. They were very young, about the same age as Yi Ling. They looked at Yi Xian and the others with fear in their eyes. Some of them were even trembling. Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, a girl suddenly said in a trembling voice, You are Yi Ling's brother?" Yi Xian looked at the girl. She shrank back and said in a trembling voice, Will you kill us?" Yi Xian turned to look at a Blue Sword Sect disciple. "If we lose, Will they let the young disciples of my Blue Sword sect go? The disciple shook his head. Yi Xian said softly, but we must let them go. Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, remember, we are humans, not beasts. As he spoke, he pointed his sword at the girls. Many of you have hatred in your eyes. It's fine. If you want revenge in the future, my Blue Sword sect welcomes you. After that, he led the people of the Blue Sword sect and left. Chapter 344. Just like this, Yi Xian led the disciples of Blue Sword sect and left Cold North sect. Of course, when they left, all the treasures of Cold North sect were taken away by Yi Xian. After leaving the frigid North sect, Yi Xian brought everyone to the World Guardian Mountain. At this moment, Realm Protection Alliance was empty. Inside the Realm Protection Palace, Yi Xian looked around and was silent for a long time. Then he said softly, take everything away. An hour later, Yi Xian and others left Realm Protection Alliance. All the treasures of Realm Protection Alliance were taken away by Yi Xian and others. Yi Xian and others didn't return to Blue Sword sect. Instead, they went to the next place. Sweep. Soon, all the forces that went to Blue Sword sect to help Realm Protection Alliance disappeared one by one. Crazy revenge. Yi Xian led the disciples of Blue Sword sect to take revenge. And the true Imperial Law Realm experts of these forces were basically killed by the mysterious woman. Therefore, none of the forces could resist Yi Xian and others. Soon, Yi Xian led the disciples of Blue Sword sect to the last force. Blue Waves Academy. In the sky above Blue Waves Academy, an old man blocked in front of Yi Xian and others. This person was the master of Ji Yun. The old man looked at Yi Xian and others with a complicated expression. Can you let Blue Waves Academy go for the sake of little Yun? Yi Xian shook his head. Sorry, this time, I represent Blue Sword sect. As he finished speaking, he pressed his right hand down. Kill! Following Yi Xian's voice, the disciples of Blue Sword sect behind him all rushed towards Blue Waves Academy. In front of Yi Xian, the expression of the old man changed. He was about to attack when a sword was already at his forehead. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, if you want to die, then do it. The old man stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Half an hour later, Yi Xian left Blue Waves Academy along with the disciples of Blue Sword sect. In the air, the old man looked at the corpses on the ground with a trace of sorrow in his eyes. At that time, when Blue Waves Academy wanted to target Yi Xian, he strongly opposed it. However, Qiu Yuan believed that Yi Xian would lose without a doubt. One wrong decision and the 1,000-year inheritance of Blue Waves Academy was destroyed in a day. A moment later, the old man sighed softly, turned around, and left. Blue Sword sect. Yi Xian brought everyone back to the Ashen Sword sect. Right now, the 6 peaks of the Ashen Sword sect had already collapsed. It was a complete mess. Looking at the Azure Sword sect in front of them, the expressions of the people behind Yi Xian dimmed. Many people were no longer around. At this time, Yi Xian said softly, do a head count and settle the dead. Behind him, a disciple of the Azure Sword sect slightly bowed. Understood. After speaking, he turned around and left with a group of people. Yi Xian arrived at what used to be the Cloudy Sword Peak. All that was left of this place was ruins. Yi Xian sat on the ruins. He just sat there for the whole night. Many people were missing. Chen Beihan, Jian Xian, Lian Bixian, Zhan Tai, and Yu Qi. Yu Qi. Thinking of this, Yi Xian quickly entered the prison pagoda. Inside the prison pagoda, Yi Xian arrived in front of Yu Qi's soul. At this moment, Yu Qi's soul was wrapped in a sword light. Reconstruct the body. Yu Qi's problem was not only reconstructing the body, he also needed to repair his soul. Although it was an extremely troublesome matter, as long as there was hope, it was good. Dao Yi Academy. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. Thinking of this, Yi Xian left the prison pagoda. He had to settle the matters in Azure World as soon as possible, then go to Dao Yi Academy. To rebuild Azure Sword sect, what he needed the most was money. And now, Yi Xian had no lack of money. It could be said that he was the richest person in Azure World. One should know that those forces that he had gone to take revenge on were not ordinary forces. The wealth of those forces was in his hands. All kinds of treasures, spirit stones, he had lost count. Yi Xian searched for a few more mountain ranges within the territory of Azure Sword Sect. Very quickly, a palace was erected on top of these mountains. As for Yi Xian, he returned to Azure Province. After returning to Azure Province, the first thing Yi Xian did was to send out a summon order. Very quickly, the former students of Azure Waves Academy returned to Azure Waves Academy. In front of Azure Waves Palace, Yi Xian sat quietly. One by one, people came to him and bowed deeply. Now, not far from him, there were more than 20 people standing. All of them were former students of Azure Waves Academy. At this moment, the sound of the earth trembling came from afar. Yi Xian raised his head and looked. Not far from the foot of the mountain, more than 100 cavalrymen were rushing over. Azure Waves Dao soldiers. These Azure Waves Dao soldiers were very fast. In the blink of an eye, they arrived in front of Azure Waves Palace. 100 of them dismounted and knelt down on one knee in front of Yi Xian. "Greetings, Dean." Everyone's voice was filled with excitement and agitation. They had waited for this day for a long time. Yi Xian said softly, "Get up." As soon as he said that, more than 100 people stood up and quietly stood to the side. At this moment, a beautiful figure suddenly flashed in the distance. Very quickly, a woman appeared in front of Yi Xian. Jiang Jiu. Jiang Jiu looked at Yi Xian. Suddenly, she stretched out her jade-like finger and gently lifted Yi Xian's chin. "Do you still remember me?" Yi Xian stood up. He gently hugged Jiang Jiu and said softly, "Little Jiu." Hearing this, Jiang Jiu's delicate body trembled slightly. Very quickly, she wrapped her arms around Yi Xian's waist. "I thought you weren't coming back." Yi Xian smiled. "Why would I?" After saying that, he looked behind Jiang Jiu. Behind Jiang Jiu stood 10 people. These 10 people were the 10 people that he had selected previously. And at this moment, these 10 people were already in the Dharma defensive realm. Dharma defensive realm. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was a little shocked. Jiang Jiu suddenly smiled. "Are you a little shocked?" Yi Xian nodded. Jiang Jiu turned to look at the 10 people. Her expression was cold. "Greetings, Dean." The 10 people looked at Yi Xian. No one moved. Seeing this scene, Jiang Jiu frowned slightly. At this moment, Yi Xian smiled. "They are getting arrogant." As his voice fell, he had already disappeared. The next moment, bam, bam, bam. Before everyone's eyes, the 10 people were sent flying hundreds of feet away. The 10 people struggled on the ground for a long time before slowly getting up. Seeing this scene, everyone around was shocked, especially the 10 people. One should know that they were already in the Dharma defensive realm. It could be said that they were the top powerhouses in Qingzhou. However, they did not expect that in front of Yi Xian, they did not even have the ability to fight back. Jiang Jiu was also shocked. She knew that Yi Xian had become stronger, but she did not expect him to be this strong. As if thinking of something, she turned to look at the 10 people. "Greetings, Dean." The 10 people slowly stood up. Just as they were about to bow, a powerful sword will suddenly shrouded them. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. The 10 people were stopped. In an instant, the 10 people knelt on the ground. Yi Xian slowly walked in front of the 10 people. "What? If I am not strong, you won't recognize me?" The 10 people were sweating profusely and did not speak. Yi Xian was expressionless. He lightly stomped his right foot. Boom! The 10 people sprawled on the ground. At the same time, everyone's bones were cracking. Yi Xian said calmly, "How did you achieve what you have today?" At this moment, one of them said in a trembling voice, "It was given by the dean." Yi Xian was expressionless. "And then?" The person hurriedly said, "We know our mistakes. Please forgive us, Dean." Yi Xian shook his head and turned to look at Jiang Jiu not far away. "Their strength has increased, but I am very dissatisfied with their character. Therefore I have decided to take back everything they have. As for their cultivation, consider it as a gift from me." When he finished, he turned to look at the 10 people. "You are free." Hearing this, the 10 people's expressions changed drastically. The 10 people hurriedly begged, but Yi Xian had already turned and left. Not far away, Jiang Jiu glanced at the 10 people. His expression was rather complicated. You think that you are already the strongest in Qingzhou after reaching Magic Defending Realm. You think that he needs to rely on you, needs you more than you need him. Therefore, you don't respect him like before. Unfortunately, you didn't expect that he is even stronger than you. He is so strong that you can only look up to him. Speaking until here, she slightly paused and then continued. From today onwards, you are free. In the future, no one will provide you with cultivation resources, and no one will come to nurture you. When she finished speaking, she turned and left. Behind Zhang Jiu, the faces of the 10 people instantly turned pale. Without cultivation resources, this was undoubtedly fatal for them. Because they could grow up to now because they only needed to cultivate and didn't need to care about anything else. But now, they didn't have this treatment. In the distance, those Blue Waves Academy students and Blue Waves Dao soldiers glanced at the 10 people, then turned and left. To them, Yi Xian was supreme. Moreover, their respect towards Yi Xian wasn't just because of Yi Xian's formidable strength, it was also because of everything Yi Xian had done for them. Yi Xian stood silently within Blue Wave's palace while Zhang Jiu stood behind him. Zhang Jiu glanced at Yi Xian and asked softly, "Why are you so angry?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I'm not angry, but they've already become arrogant. I don't need arrogant people. If I leave them alive, then all of you won't be able to suppress them when I'm not around." Not around? Zhang Jiu's beautiful brows knit together slightly. You're leaving Azure Prefecture? Yi Xian shook his head. Not Azure Prefecture. I'm leaving the Firmament World. Leaving the Firmament World? Zhang Jiu's frown deepened. You're leaving the Firmament World? Yi Xian nodded. This time, I'm taking you to the Central Divine Prefecture. Everyone will be able to develop better there. Zhang Jiu said solemnly, then Azure Prefecture. Yi Xian said softly, naturally we can't give up. We'll leave some people here and let them continue recruiting. Zhang Jiu thought for a moment, then nodded. That's fine. Yi Xian smiled faintly, then went to the Martyr's Palace with Zhang Jiu. Inside the palace, Yi Xian walked to Ji Yun's memorial tablet. A moment later he said softly, Old Ji, Blue Waves Academy will soon become the largest academy in the firmament world. At this time, he frowned slightly, then took out a sound transmission stone. Soon, a voice came from it. Something happened to the ancient Wu clan. P.S. Low profile. Continue to be low profile. Wait until I erupt, then I'll be high profile. End of this chapter. Chapter 345. Something had happened to the ancient Wu clan. Yi Xian frowned. After a moment of silence, he turned to look at Zhang Jiu. I have to return to the Divine Central Continent. Bring the Blue Waves Academy disciples and Dao soldiers to the Divine Central Continent later. Zhang Jiu nodded and said softly, Be careful. Yi Xian nodded. You too. With that, he disappeared on the spot. Not long after Yi Xian left, a woman came to Blue Waves Academy. She was the ruler of Ning Country, Tuoba Yen. After learning that Yi Xian had left, Tuoba Yen stood in silence for a long time before turning to leave. Yi Xian immediately rushed to the ancient Wu clan after returning to the Divine Central Continent. When he arrived at the Wu clan, his expression changed. There was no one alive in the entire Wu clan. Yi Xian hurriedly looked around, but he did not see Wei Yongtian anywhere. Song Xian appeared behind Yi Xian. He glanced at the corpses on the ground and said in a low voice, The ancient Wu clan has been exterminated. Yi Xian's expression was cold. Do you know who did it? Song Xian shook his head. Besides the Realm Defense Alliance, only the Celestial Gate can do this silently. The Realm Defense Alliance is obviously impossible. As for the Celestial Gate, they have no reason to attack the ancient Wu clan. Yi Xian said in a low voice. If it's not them, who else could it be? Song Xian looked around. Could there be another mysterious force in the Azure world? He shook his head. It's unlikely. If there is such a force, it would be impossible to hide from my Blue Sword sect and the Realm Defense Alliance. If it's not a force from the Azure world, it could be a force outside the Azure world. Outside the Azure world. Yi Xian seemed to think of something. He hurriedly took out a voice transmission stone and contacted Wei Tian. After a while, a low voice came from it. Who is it? It wasn't Endless Heaven's voice. Yi Xian's face darkened. Who are you? Where is the girl? After a moment of silence, the other side said, Scram. As soon as he finished speaking, there was no movement from the other side. In the field, Yi Xian's expression was terrifyingly dark. After a while, he suddenly felt that unending sky should be fine. That was because this girl had always been very mysterious. She was definitely not an ordinary person, and this unforeseen event was very likely related to her. Moments later, Yi Xian softly said, Teacher Uncle Cong Xian, pass down my order. Help me find someone. She's called Wei Yang Tian. Cong Xian nodded. All right. With that, he turned around and left. In a certain part of the starry sky, 9 giant dragons that were nearly 10,000 feet long were dragging a dragon chariot as they soared through the sky. Each of the giant dragons was emanating a dragon's might that could destroy the heavens and the earth. A little girl was sitting cross-legged on the dragon chariot. If Yi Xian was here, he would definitely be extremely shocked, because this little girl was Wei Yang Tian. There were 30 people around her, all dressed in white robes and wielding black staffs. Every one of them gave off an unfathomable aura. After an unknown period of time, Wei Yang Tian suddenly opened her eyes. There was a trace of confusion in her eyes, but they gradually cleared up. After a while, she seemed to think of something and turned to look in a certain direction. At this moment, a white-robed man not far away suddenly bowed respectfully. Is there something the Heaven Master needs? Wei Yang Tian withdrew her gaze and softly said, It's just a strand of distracting thoughts in the cycle of reincarnation. The white-robed man bowed again and said, Do you need me to sever it for the Heaven Master? Wei Yang Tian coldly glared at the white-robed man. Scram! The white-robed man's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly and respectfully retreated to the side. Just like that, the group headed into the depths of the distant starry sky. Gradually, the group completely disappeared into the boundless starry sky. Azure World. In the current Azure World, it could be said that Azure Sword Sect was the sole power, because in the entire Azure World, other than Celestial Gate, there was no other force that could contend against Azure Sword Sect. And Celestial Gate was a force that basically did not appear in the world, so in the entire Azure World, Azure Sword Sect could be said to be the strongest force. And Zhang Jiu had also brought the Dao soldiers and students of Azure Waves Academy to the Central Plains. And now the headquarters of Azure Waves Academy was in Sky Cloud City. This Sky Cloud City used to belong to the Realm Defense Alliance, but now it belonged to him, Yi Xian. Not only that, Yi Xian also called Ling Han, Ji Banzwang, and the others to Sky Cloud City. In a large hall, Yi Xian looked at Ling Han and the others in front of him, and smiled slightly. Long time no see. Ling Han and the others looked at Yi Xian, and their faces were full of smiles. Now, Yi Xian's reputation in Azure Province could be said to be like the midday sun. Really like the midday sun. Now in the entire Azure Province, no one's reputation could be compared to Yi Xian's. Yi Xian smiled. I called you all here, other than to reminisce about the past. There's another matter, and that is I'm about to leave Azure World. Leave Azure World. Everyone was stunned. Ji Banzwang frowned slightly. To the galaxy? Yi Xian nodded. I still have many things to do, so in a few days at most, I will leave Azure World. Where are you going? Ling Han suddenly asked. Yi Xian smiled. Dao E Academy. This academy seems to be the best academy in our galaxy. You have to cultivate well, and in the future, come to this academy to look for me, understand? Ling Han smiled bitterly. I'm afraid we don't have that ability. Yi Xian shook his head. Your talent is not bad. The only thing you lack is Purple Source. In my Blue Waves Academy, you don't have to worry about cultivating Purple Source. You can cultivate with peace of mind. I believe in no time you will all reach the true Imperial Law tier. He wasn't being polite, because these people in front of him were indeed very talented, especially Ling Han and Ji Banzwang. These two were already at the peak of the true Imperial Law tier, and Yi Xian was only half a step into the true Imperial Law tier. Besides them, Mo Yunqi, Bai Zhe, and Ji Anji were also very talented. As long as they had enough cultivation resources, reaching the true Imperial Law tier was not a problem at all. One day later, after Yi Xian explained everything, he returned to Azure Sword Sect. In the rebuilt Azure Sword Hall, there were only 3 people. Yi Xian, Cong Xian, and Gu Shaoxian. Song Xian looked at Yi Xian and said in a low voice, "Why don't you wait a few more years before going to Daoyi Academy?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't have that much time to wait." He hadn't forgotten what the plain-dressed woman had told him. He had to work hard to become stronger, because although the World Prison Tower was peaceful now, he knew that this was only temporary. He couldn't rely on the plain-dressed woman forever. Apart from that, he still had to help Xueqi reconstruct his physical body, and this matter couldn't be delayed. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Song Xian hesitated for a moment, and then sighed in a low voice. "You are now the sect master of Azure Sword Sect." Yi Xian said, "I want to give the position of sect master to the two martial uncles." Song Xian hurriedly shook his head. "No, you are the sect master appointed by the sect master. Apart from you, no one else can be the sect master of Azure Sword Sect." Gu Shaoxian also nodded slightly. "You are the sect master of Azure Sword Sect now. Even if you go to Daoyi Academy, you will still be the sect master of Azure Sword Sect." Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but Gu Shaoxian glanced at him. "This is your responsibility. Don't say any more, understand?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly and nodded. "All right." Gu Shaoxian nodded. "When are you leaving?" Yi Xian smiled. "My matters are almost settled. I'm almost done, so I'll leave tomorrow." Gu Shaoxian glanced at Yi Xian. "Remember to bring her back." Yi Xian solemnly said, "I will." At night, Yi Xian left Azure Sword Sect, but he didn't leave. Instead, he returned to Qingzhou. There was still someone he wanted to see. Ning Country, Tuoba Yan's bedroom. Tuoba Yan, who was reading the memorials, suddenly raised her head. A man was standing not far from her. It was Yi Xian. Tuoba Yan retracted her gaze and continued reading. Yi Xian walked in front of Tuoba Yan. "I am leaving Azure World." Tuoba Yan's hand trembled slightly. She didn't raise her head and continued reading the memorials. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then turned and left. He was very fast and silently disappeared from the hall. Tuoba Yan suddenly looked up. When she saw that the hall was empty, she was stunned. Soon, she got up and walked out of the hall. It was also empty outside. Tuoba Yan was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, a voice sounded in her ear. "Looking for me?" It was Yi Xian's voice. Tuoba Yan leaned into Yi Xian's arms and asked softly, "Are you leaving?" Yi Xian nodded. "I am leaving Azure World." Tuoba Yan asked, "Are you coming back?" Yi Xian said, "Yes." "When?" "I don't know." Tuoba Yan fell silent. Yi Xian asked softly, "Are you leaving with me?" Tuoba Yan shook her head. "As long as you return it." Yi Xian thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." An hour later, Yi Xian was about to leave when Tuoba Yan suddenly said softly, "Stay here tonight." Yi Xian was stunned, then grinned. "Okay." A night of singing in the spring breeze. The next day at dawn, Yi Xian left Ning Nation. This time, Yi Xian didn't return to the divine central continent. He found Drunken Immortal Inn and took a small nebula warship toward outer space. On the nebula warship, Yi Xian looked back down. Azure World was getting smaller and smaller. He was leaving just like that. Yi Xian had a complicated feeling. He didn't expect to leave Azure Province and Azure World. When would he return? Yi Xian shook his head. He didn't know when he would return, but he was sure that he would. After a long time, the nebula warship entered the starry sky. This was Yi Xian's first time entering the starry sky. Looking at the endless starry sky, Yi Xian once again felt how insignificant he was. Insignificant. In the face of this vast universe, humans were insignificant. At this moment, a nebula warship suddenly appeared in the distant starry sky. It was extremely fast and arrived before Yi Xian's nebula warship in the blink of an eye. A middle-aged man flew out of the nebula warship and looked down at Yi Xian. "Are you from Azure World?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes, you are?" The middle-aged man said coldly. "Is Yi Xian in Azure World?" Yi Xian was stunned, then asked, "Are you looking for Yi Xian?" The middle-aged man frowned. "You know Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded. "I've heard of him. May I know why you are looking for him?" The middle-aged man said calmly. I heard that he has the top item on the interstellar bounty list, so I want to borrow it from him. Hearing this, Yi Xian's face darkened. Chapter 346. Interstellar Bounty List. Yi Xian's face was gloomy. He knew that the news of the World Prison Pagoda must have spread. At this moment the middle-aged man suddenly said, When I mentioned Yi Xian, your expression changed slightly. Why, are you familiar with him? Or are you Yi Xian? Hearing this, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the middle-aged man. Do I look like Yi Xian? The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian. Rumor has it that Yi Xian is a swordsman, and a sword immortal. And you, I feel sword intent on you. You are also a swordsman, right? Yi Xian smiled and said, Yes. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes. So you are Yi Xian? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Seeing Yi Xian admit it, the middle-aged man's mouth curled up slightly. It seems that my luck is not bad. Yi Xian smiled and said, Then, what are you going to do now? The middle-aged man's smile widened. Guess. Yi Xian thought for a moment then said, Seize the treasure and then kill to silence them. The middle-aged man was stunned, then laughed and said, You guessed it right. As his voice fell, his entire body disappeared on the spot. Yi Xian suddenly heard a qi sound, and then he felt a powerful pressure envelop him. Void-piercing realm. If it was before, it would definitely be very difficult for him to face a void-piercing realm powerhouse. But now, after devouring the soul of the Realm Protector Alliance leader and those powerhouses, he no longer felt any pressure when facing a void realm powerhouse. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword, sword light flashed, and the sword was sheathed. Chi! The sound of blood spurting suddenly rang out. The scene quieted down. Yi Xian was already behind the middle-aged man, and at this moment, blood spurted out from the middle-aged man's throat. The middle-aged man looked ahead sluggishly and murmured, You are actually so strong. Behind the middle-aged man, Yi Xian said, It's my fault. Middle-aged man. Yi Xian took out the ethereal execution ring, and soon, the middle-aged man was directly absorbed by Yi Xian. Yi Xian found that the ethereal execution ring's function was to absorb soul, spirit power, and energy from the human body. It had to be said that this was against the natural order of the world. Of course, he wouldn't intentionally devour others for the sake of cultivation. As for the enemies who wanted to kill him, no matter how cruel they were to him, Yi Xian would not go overboard. The star cloud warship Yi Xian was on continued its journey. On the nebula ship, Yi Xian counted the spirit stones and treasures he had. Currently, he had no less than 1 million purple origin crystals. He had exchanged all the best quality spirit stones for purple origin crystals. As for treasures and cultivation techniques, he had left most of them to Blue Waves Academy and Blue Sword Sect. Currently, he had 4 heaven-ranked swords. As for the rest of the heaven-grade treasures, there were a total of 13. As for those below heaven rank, he left all of them to Blue Waves Academy and Blue Sword Sect. Currently, he didn't have many things, but they were the best. Moreover, he had left a large portion for Blue Waves Academy and Blue Sword Sect. Otherwise, he would have left even more. Several tens of thousands of violet origin crystals were enough to buy a heaven-rank spirit artifact. Hence, with 1 million violet origin crystals, he could be said to be extremely wealthy. In terms of cultivation, he was now at the peak of the true Imperial Dharma realm, a sword immortal. Other than that, he had not completely absorbed the experts he had devoured. It could be said that once he completely absorbed them, his strength would definitely increase greatly. Needless to say, in the firmament world, he was one of the strongest cultivators. However, Yi Xian knew very well that he would not be able to afford it. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The enemy was not in the firmament world, but in this tower, and those who coveted this tower, and those bastards in the tower. To these people he was still weak. He still needed to work hard. Dao Yi Academy. Yi Xian raised his head and looked into the distance. In the distance, there was a vast and boundless starry sky. After leaving the firmament world, to him, the starry sky in front of him was a whole new world. At this moment, an old man appeared beside Yi Xian. The old man bowed to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, there are still 10 days until we reach the Dao Yi Academy. During this period, We might encounter a chaotic starry sky. So, young Master Yi, please be careful. Yi Xian nodded. I will be careful. The old man bowed, turned around, and left. Yi Xian returned to his room and entered the prison pagoda. As soon as he entered the pagoda, Xiao Linger floated in front of him. She grinned and extended her hand. Yi Xian smiled, then took out 2 spirit fruits and handed them to Xiao Linger. Seeing the spirit fruits, Xiao Linger's eyes lit up, and she hugged the fruits. After sending Xiao Linger away, Yi Xian went to the second floor. In the second floor, the Almighty on the second floor was still there. The Almighty on the second floor glanced at Yi Xian, but did not speak. Yi Xian walked to the Almighty on the second floor. Was it the one on the 4th floor who spoke in the pagoda? He did not forget that when the woman in the plain dress was around, there was a voice in the pagoda that resisted her. Moreover, that person had threatened to kill him. The Almighty on the second floor shook his head. Above, but I do not know which floor it is. Even higher up. Yi Xian said in a low voice, I am the pagoda master now. Can I kill him? The Almighty on the second floor said calmly, What kind of dream are you having in broad daylight? Yi Xian, the Almighty on the second floor continued, Unless the pagoda is completely restored and you have full control of it, then the life and death of all the creatures in the pagoda will be in your hands. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed, feeling somewhat helpless. He had no idea when the pagoda would be restored, and he did not know when he would be able to truly control the pagoda. The only thing he knew was that those guys in the pagoda wanted to kill him. And those who wanted the pagoda would also come to kill him. As if knowing what Yi Xian was thinking, the Almighty on the second floor said coldly, Do you know how many people in this world want this pagoda? And ask yourself, after getting this pagoda, did you change your fate? Yi Xian thought about it. If not for this pagoda, his and Yi Ling's fates would have been very miserable. Although he had worked hard along the way, it was undeniable that without this bit of luck, it would have been very difficult for him to reach this step today. The Almighty on the second floor said, This pagoda has been suppressed by her, but you must remember in the future, do not activate this pagoda at will. Otherwise, if the pagoda's seal breaks, your soul will be seriously injured. In addition, once those guys come out, they will definitely kill you and take your treasures. Yi Xian said softly, I am carrying a volcano with me. The Almighty on the second floor said calmly, Be content. With that, she slowly closed her eyes. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, Well, when will your injuries heal? The Almighty on the second floor did not answer. Yi Xian was speechless and did not ask again, leaving the prison pagoda. Inside the room, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the bed, his eyes closed. Stabilizing his cultivation. He had not reached the true defensive law stage for long, and had not completely stabilized his cultivation. Otherwise, he could have obtained a sword. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. He continued to break through. Not long after Yi Xian left the firmament world, a dozen people suddenly arrived at the firmament sword sect of the divine central continent, led by a middle-aged man. The dozen people had just arrived at the firmament sword sect when Song Xian appeared in front of them. Song Xian glanced at the dozen people and said in a low voice, You are. The middle-aged man said indifferently, Is Yi Xian in the firmament sword sect? Song Xian frowned slightly. You are looking for him? The middle-aged man nodded. Song Xian said in a low voice, He is no longer in the firmament sword sect. The middle-aged man frowned. Then where is he? Song Xian glanced at the middle-aged man and the others and said in a low voice, You are looking for him? The middle-aged man smiled. To ask him some questions. Song Xian nodded. He has already left the firmament world. As for where he went, I do not know. Left the firmament world. The middle-aged man's frown deepened when he heard this. A short while later, the middle-aged man led the dozen people away. There was a trace of worry in Song Xian's eyes as he gazed at the middle-aged man and the others. Because this wasn't the first group to come looking for Yi Xian. It was the 9th group. All of them had come to look for Yi Xian. Moreover, all of them were void-piercing stage experts. A short while later, Song Xian sighed softly, turned around, and left. On the other side, the middle-aged man and the others didn't leave the firmament world immediately after they left. The middle-aged man glanced at the dozen people beside him, and they quickly turned around and left. Around 2 hours later, the dozen people returned to the middle-aged man's side. An old man walked over to the middle-aged man and said in a low voice, "We have investigated clearly. Yi Xian has indeed left the firmament world." Left the firmament world. The middle-aged man was silent for a moment, and then he said, "We must find this person. We can't let this pagoda fall into the hands of others. Send my orders. Have our people put down whatever they are doing and focus on finding this person." The old man nodded slightly. Understood. Soon, the dozen people left the firmament world. Not long after they left the firmament world, a black-clothed man suddenly arrived at the firmament sword sect. Within the firmament sword hall, Zhang Xian looked at the black-clothed man in front of him. "Are you also here to look for Yi Xian?" The black-clothed man said in a low voice. "He is not in the firmament sword sect?" Zhang Xian nodded. "He has left." The black-clothed man fell silent. Zhang Xian glanced at the black-clothed man. "You are?" The black-clothed man said softly. "I am here to pick him up." Zhang Xian was slightly surprised. "Pick him up?" The black-clothed man nodded. "To bring him back to the Dugu family." Zhang Xian was slightly puzzled. "Dugu family? I think his surname is Yi." The black-clothed man shook his head. "He has the bloodline of my Dugu family. This time, I have specially come to bring him back to the Dugu family." Zhang Xian wanted to ask more, but the black-clothed man had already turned around and left. Outside the firmament sword sect, the black-clothed man sighed softly. "It's good that he left." As he said this, he seemed to have thought of something and his brows furrowed deeply. The family knows that he has a great treasure, but they don't know that he has a supreme expert behind him. Moreover, young Miss is still imprisoned in the endless purgatory. I'm afraid that something big will happen in the future. In the same place, the black-clothed man was silent for a long time. After a long time he said again, "No, we must find him. Only he can save young Mississippi." After saying this, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. P.S. Let me ask you something. If your body is weak, what should you eat? Serious disclaimer, I am asking for the readers. End of this chapter. Chapter 347. 5 days later, Yi Xian's nebula warship came to a stop. Outside Yi Xian's room, a voice rang out. "Young Master Yi, we've arrived at Daoyi City." Moments later, the door opened and Yi Xian walked out. The elderly man was stunned when he saw Yi Xian. Yi Xian still looked the same, but there was an indescribable aura around him. He couldn't describe it, but he could feel it. Yi Xian asked, "Have we arrived?" The elderly man regained his senses and quickly replied, "Not yet, but we've arrived at Daoyi City. This city is a subsidiary city of Daoyi Academy, and it's not far from Daoyi Academy. Also, ordinary people are not allowed to enter Daoyi Academy. Only those who pass the assessment can enter Daoyi Academy." Yi Xian asked again, "Are there any conditions to enter Daoyi Academy?" The elderly man smiled. "I don't know the details, but based on young Master Ye's strength, you're definitely qualified to enter Daoyi Academy." Yi Xian smiled. "That might not be the case." The elderly man smiled. "Young Master Yi, you're too humble." Yi Xian smiled and walked out of the room with the elderly man. On the nebula warship, Yi Xian looked into the distance. At the end of his vision, there stood a huge city. It was huge, like a huge beast, giving off an invisible sense of oppression. He had seen the Thousand Beast City and Skycloud City before. These two cities could be said to be the biggest cities in the Azure Firmament world. Especially the Thousand Beast City, it had shocked him. But now, he realized that the two cities could not be compared to the Daoyi City in front of him. No, there was no comparison. The city in front of him was not something that could be built by humans. The old man next to Yi Xian suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, do you know the origin of Daoyi City?" Yi Xian shook his head. The old man said with smile, "Daoyi City is not a simple place. Speaking of Daoyi City, one must mention a person, Daoyi Mu." "Mu Daoyi?" Yi Xian asked. "Who?" The old man smiled faintly. Mu Daoyi is a legendary figure in the never-ending star zone. This man's talent is extremely terrifying. He reached the true defensive Dharma realm at the age of 12 and became a martial god. He is almost the youngest martial god in the history of the never-ending galaxy. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned serious. A 12-year-old true defense realm cultivator. Furthermore, he was a martial god. This man was too much of a monster. The old man said, apart from that, he also established the Dao Yi Academy. It is the best academy in the entire never-ending galaxy, and is a transcendent faction in the never-ending galaxy. Of course, the reason why it is so transcendent is that it does not involve itself in any conflicts in the outside world. Then he looked at Yi Xian. The Dao Yi Academy has gathered the top geniuses from countless worlds in the never-ending galaxy. Not to mention other worlds, even the top 5 on the martial arts ranking list in the Azure Firmament world, as well as some hidden geniuses, have mostly entered the Dao Yi Academy. Therefore, the Dao Yi Academy has another nickname, the Genius Concentration Camp. The Monster Concentration Camp. Yi Xian nodded and smiled. It seems that the students of the Dao Yi Academy are not ordinary people. The old man nodded and seemed to recall something. He said seriously, Young Master Yi, before I came, the first floor master asked me to tell young Master Yi that there are only 2 kinds of people who can enter the Dao Yi Academy. The first kind is those who are outstanding. The second kind is those who are outstanding and have powerful factions backing them, such as the Realm Defense Alliance and the Mystic Gate. The Realm Defense Alliance? Yi Xian frowned. There are people from the Realm Defense Alliance in the Dao Yi Academy? The old man said seriously, yes. According to the information we received, 2 monsters from the Realm Defense Alliance have entered the Dao Yi Academy. Therefore, if young Master Yi enters the Dao Yi Academy, you must be careful, and do not act recklessly. Although there is competition within the academy, it is strictly forbidden to kill each other. Yi Xian chuckled. Don't worry, I won't act recklessly. As for whether they will, I don't know. The old man laughed bitterly. He had heard of Yi Xian, and had some understanding of Yi Xian's character. He knew that if Yi Xian were to enter the Dao Yi Academy, the Dao Yi Academy would not be peaceful. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Is Mu Dao Yi still around? The old man laughed bitterly. I don't know about that. However, for an expert like him, it would be hard for him to die even if he wanted to. Yi Xian nodded and looked towards the Dao Yi Academy. Let's go in. Next to Yi Xian, the old man quickly said, I won't be going in with young Master Yi. If a star cloud warship wants to enter the city, it will have to pay a high price of purple source crystals. Therefore, I hope young Master Yi can forgive me. Yi Xian said with a smile. It's okay. Be careful on your way back. The old man said, Young Master Yi, take care. Yi Xian nodded, and did not say anything else. He turned and headed towards the Dao Yi Academy. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived in front of the Dao Yi Academy's gates. The Dao Yi Academy's gates were tens of zhang tall, and a person standing in front of the gates was as small as an ant. Yi Xian entered the Dao Yi Academy. The city was bustling, and the people were all cultivators. Fortunately, there weren't any true defense realm powerhouses walking around like dogs. As for the void-piercing realm, there wasn't a single one. Clearly, even in the never-ending starfield, there were few void-piercing realm experts. Yi Xian arrived in the city. There was a high platform in the middle of the city, and on top of the platform was a round pillar that was more than 30 zhang long. The testing pillar. Yi Xian asked around and found out that this round platform was left behind by the Dao Yi Academy to test those who wanted to join the Dao Yi Academy. Anyone could come and take the test. As long as they passed, they would have a chance to enter the Dao Yi Academy. Many people were already taking the test on the round platform. Yi Xian found that the test was very simple. All they had to do was hit the testing pillar with all their strength. The testing pillar was divided into 4 sections, which represented the 4 levels: Heaven tier, Sector tier, Mystic tier, and Human tier. As long as the Human tier lit up, they passed. Yi Xian found that more than 30 people had taken the test since he arrived, but none of them had lit up the Human tier. Most of them were in their 20s, and the lowest cultivation level was at the Dharma-controlling realm. Yi Xian's expression turned serious when he saw this. Even a Dharma-controlling realm expert could not light up the Human tier of the testing pillar. This showed how strict the Dao Yi Academy was when it came to enrolling students. A Dharma-controlling realm expert in his 20s would be considered a top genius in the firmament world. But here it was just average. Soon, The number of people taking the test decreased. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then walked up to the round platform. There were 3 people in front of him. Soon, the 2 people in front of him had failed. Yi Xian walked up to the round platform. He thought for a moment, then punched the testing pillar. The testing pillar did not budge. Yi Xian was surprised when he saw this. The testing pillar was more difficult than he had imagined. His punch was equivalent to the peak of the Dharma controlling realm, but the testing pillar did not budge at all. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then was about to take out his sword when a voice came from behind him. Why doesn't this person have any self-awareness? Yi Xian turned around to see a woman standing in front of him. She was about 18 or 19 years old and wore a lotus leaf dress. She looked pretty, but her lips were thin, making her look mean. Seeing Yi Xian turn around, the woman looked at him coldly. You're only at the Dharma controlling realm, yet you still want to take the test. People like you are just trying to get lucky. Yi Xian said with a smile. After you. After saying that, he stood to the side. The woman did not step forward, but continued, one must know one's limits. If one doesn't know one's limits, then one is ignorant. Do you understand? Yi Xian said plainly. Why do you have so much to say? Hearing this, the woman's eyes turned cold. Say that again? Yi Xian said. I say, why do you have so much to say? The woman suddenly took a step forward, and a powerful pressure suddenly shrouded Yi Xian. True Dharma controlling realm aura. Yi Xian stood where he was and did not move. He was not affected by the woman's aura at all. Seeing this, the woman frowned slightly. She looked at Yi Xian coldly. So you're holding back? Yi Xian shook his head. You test first. He really had no interest in tangling with a little girl. The woman suddenly walked in front of Yi Xian and looked straight at Yi Xian. Do it. Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. Do it. The woman sneered. Aren't you very powerful? Do it. Yi Xian was a little speechless. What kind of weirdo was this? The woman suddenly shouted furiously. Quickly. Yi Xian thought for a moment. In the next moment, he suddenly vanished on the spot. In the blink of an eye. Bang! With a loud explosion, the woman was sent flying. She flew for more than 300 meters. Countless people in the surroundings instantly looked over at the sight of this. To be more precise, they were looking at Yi Xian. 300 m away, the woman glanced at her right hand. Her right palm had split open, and fresh blood was seeping out from it. After a moment of silence, the woman raised her head to look at Yi Xian. I was blind. Looks like you have some ability. Yi Xian shook his head and paid no further attention to the woman. He turned around and walked over to the measurement pillar. Yi Xian grinned as he gazed at the pillar. He opened his right hand, and a sword appeared in his palm. In the next moment, he stabbed it forward. The sword stabbed into the pillar. After a moment of silence, the human section of the measurement pillar lit up before everyone's eyes. Everyone in the surroundings gasped when they witnessed this scene. Since the human segment has lit up, it means that he has passed. However, right at this moment, the profound section above the human section suddenly lit up. Everyone was stunned at the sight of this. At this moment, the section above the human section suddenly lit up. Everyone's eyes opened wide, and their eyes were filled with disbelief. But right at this moment, the heaven section at the top of the measurement pillar suddenly lit up. At this moment, the surroundings were so silent that a falling needle could be heard. Chapter 348. The woman behind Yi Xian gazed at Yi Xian with disbelief, and then she suddenly spoke furiously. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. As she spoke, she charged at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly when he witnessed this scene. Suddenly, a furious shout resounded from afar. How dare you! As soon as this voice resounded, a strand of pressure suddenly enveloped the woman, and she was instantly forced to a stop on the spot. Meanwhile, an old man appeared on the round platform. The old man had a very long goatee that reached his chest. The old man glanced coldly at the woman. This is the testing grounds of my Dao Yi Academy. How dare you act as you please? The woman glanced at the old man and was slightly fearful, and then she hurriedly bowed deeply. Greetings, Instructor Feng. The old man paid no attention to the woman, and he gazed at Yi Xian instead. He sized up Yi Xian and asked, "A swordsman?" Yi Xian bowed slightly. "Exactly." The old man asked, "The Sword Emperor?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he nodded. As far as he was concerned, it was better to hold back. A wave of gasps instantly resounded in the surroundings when they heard this. The Sword Emperor. Even if such a young Sword Emperor couldn't be considered to be at the top in Daoi City, he could be considered to be extremely outstanding. Moreover, swordsmen's combat strength was usually extremely formidable. The old man nodded slightly when he heard Yi Xian, a Sword Emperor before the age of 20, and one who has attained the true control realm. He's barely passable. Come with me. As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to lead Yi Xian away. Meanwhile, the woman spoke abruptly. Instructor Feng, I want to be tested as well. Instructor Feng gazed at her. Then let's begin. The woman hurriedly walked in front of the testing pillar. She placed her hands on her abdomen and an invisible stream of qi immediately spread out from her body. In the next moment, she let out a soft shout and slammed her palm on the testing pillar. In an instant, the testing pillar trembled slightly. Very quickly, the human segment lit up before everyone's eyes. However, it wasn't over yet. In less than half a breath's time, the segment lit up as well. Just when everyone thought that it was about to end, the heaven segment lit up as well, but it was soon extinguished. The woman's pale face instantly revealed a smile when she witnessed this scene. She hurriedly stood to the side and looked at Instructor Feng. Instructor Feng pondered deeply for a moment, and then he said, "Follow me." Hearing this, the smile on the woman's face instantly became even brighter. At that moment, a man suddenly walked onto the round platform. The man was in his 20s and wore cloth clothes and a pair of iron shoes. With every step he took, a loud and clear sound could be heard. The man walked up to the testing pillar and threw a punch. Boom! In an instant, the entire top of the testing pillar lit up. Heaven tier. Everyone here was shocked when they witnessed this scene, and their eyes were filled with curiosity as they gazed at the man. There was a trace of surprise in Instructor Feng's eyes as well, and he sized up the man and said, "You've cultivated the body?" The man nodded. "Yes." Instructor Feng grinned. "It's rare to be able to cultivate the body to such an extent." "Rare. Come with me." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yi Xian's group of 3 followed behind him. In next to no time, the 3 of them arrived before a dense forest under Instructor Feng's lead. Instructor Feng stopped moving, and then he turned around to look at Yi Xian's group of 3. Daoi Academy is at the end of this mountain range. If all of you are able to pass through this mountain range and arrive at Daoi Academy alive, then all of you'll be a member of Daoi Academy. Moreover, which class all of you'll be assigned to will depend on your performance. This chapter isn't finished. Please continue to the next page. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Are there any restrictions?" Instructor Feng said, "There aren't any." As he spoke, he glanced at the 3 of them. "However, a word of advice, it's best for the 3 of you to join forces. Of course, I know that people like you are usually extremely conceited, and it's difficult for you to join forces with others, and you won't submit to others. If you don't change, you'll soon suffer." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. After Instructor Feng left, the man in the linen robe walked towards the dense forest in the distance, while the woman glanced at Yi Xian. "I'll definitely arrive before you." As soon as she finished speaking, she also dashed out. The 2 of them were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the distance. Yi Xian pondered for a moment, and then flew up on his sword. However, very soon, his expression changed, because a strong pressure suddenly enveloped him. The higher he went, the stronger the pressure became, and in the end, he had no choice but to stop. On the ground, Yi Xian raised his head to take a look. Indeed, things weren't that simple. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian entered the dense forest. The dense forest was very quiet, and in a place like this, the quieter it was, the more it proved that things weren't simple. Yi Xian quickened his pace, and at this moment, there was a sudden tremor in front of him. Very quickly, an enormous demonic beast appeared in front of him. The demonic beast was shaped like a bull, and its entire body was pitch black. Its body was several meters tall, and its 4 limbs were like pillars, giving off an extremely oppressive feeling. Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he released his own sword intent. When it felt the sword intent, the demonic beast was slightly stunned, and the ferocious light in its eyes gradually became dignified. After a moment, it suddenly turned around and left. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was stunned. Left? It left just like that? After a moment, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Needless to say, it was definitely the domineering aura emitted from his body that deterred the other party. No. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned around, and not far in front of him, there was a middle-aged man who appeared out of nowhere. Void-piercing realm. Yi Xian frowned. Was this person sent by Dao Yi Academy? The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian. You are Yi Xian. Hearing this, Yi Xian's frown deepened. You are not from Dao Yi Academy. The middle-aged man slowly walked towards Yi Xian. We have been looking for you all the way, and it has been very difficult. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Who are you? The middle-aged man said calmly. You don't need to know. Hand over the pagoda. I will spare your life. Prison pagoda. Yi Xian's heart trembled. You are here for the pagoda. The middle-aged man stopped in his tracks and smiled. This pagoda is a great treasure, and if it is in your possession, it will bring you endless trouble. I am helping you, do you understand? Yi Xian said in a low voice. If I give it to you, will you let me go? The middle-aged man nodded. Of course, I want the pagoda, not your life. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, This is Dao Yi Academy. Aren't you afraid of provoking Dao Yi Academy? The middle-aged man smiled. This is only the periphery of Dao Yi Academy, and look around. Yi Xian turned his head to look around, and found that the space around him and the middle-aged man had become blurred, as if it was blocked by something. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. Do you still want to resist? Yi Xian shook his head. No. The middle-aged man smiled. Then hand it over. Yi Xian nodded and was about to speak, but at this time the middle-aged man suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of Yi Xian, and at the same time, his palm was already above Yi Xian's head. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Yi Xian reacted quickly, and he stomped his right foot and retreated several meters, but the middle-aged man's palm was still above his head. Yi Xian was shocked, but he stopped retreating, and a wave of sword intent swept out of his body. Boom! With a muffled sound, Yi Xian retreated again and again, and this time, he retreated more than 30 meters. In the distance, the middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian. You're strong. With that, he clenched his right hand, and in an instant, the space around his right hand split open, and then rays of pitch-black energy converged towards his right hand. In the next moment, he suddenly shot towards Yi Xian. The space around his right hand began to crack inch by inch wherever it passed. Not far away, Yi Xian was expressionless. He shifted his consciousness slightly, and an illusory sword appeared in front of him in an instant. The Sword of Space. Yi Xian held the sword in his right hand, and thrust it forward. One strike to determine life and death. Another strike. Bang! A figure was blasted flying. It was the middle-aged man. After he flew over 100 m away, he slapped his left hand backwards and relied on the energy of space to stop himself. At this moment, his right hand had vanished. The middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian with an extremely solemn expression. Fortunately, I didn't underestimate you. Otherwise, that strike from before would have taken my life. Yi Xian walked slowly towards the middle-aged man with his sword in hand. Who exactly are you? The middle-aged man was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. The middle-aged man's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he swiftly slapped his palm forward. This slap tore the space in front of him apart, and then a strand of formidable energy converged towards his left hand from that expanse of space before it poured out from his palm. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword arrived before him. Bang! The energy emanated by the middle-aged man's left hand was instantly blasted apart. At the same time, his entire left hand transformed into nothingness. Just as the middle-aged man was about to retreat, Yi Xian's sword suddenly pressed against his forehead. The middle-aged man stared at Yi Xian. You're actually a sword immortal. You. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword suddenly stabbed forward. Chi. The sword directly penetrated the middle-aged man's forehead. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and took out his ethereal expelling ring. Soon, the middle-aged man gradually turned illusory. The middle-aged man stared at Yi Xian, and his face was filled with madness. Yi Xian, if you kill me, there will be thousands of me coming for you. You are. Bullshit. Yi Xian suddenly slashed with his sword, and the middle-aged man's head directly flew off. Soon, Yi Xian's ethereal expelling ring absorbed the middle-aged man's head, and the surrounding invisible barrier also disappeared. Yi Xian kept the middle-aged man's storage ring. Inside the storage ring, there were 2 heaven-rank spirit artifacts, and in addition, there were also 30,000 purple origin crystals. I've made a small profit. Yi Xian's heart was filled with joy. Soon, he headed off into the distance. About an hour later, the sound of fighting suddenly came from not far in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's footsteps quickened, and soon, he saw a person. It was the woman from before, and at this moment, this woman was being besieged by 3 demonic beasts. The woman was completely suppressed, and there were injuries all over her body. At this moment, the woman suddenly looked at Yi Xian and said angrily, "Still not helping?" Yi Xian was stunned, and then he chuckled, not helping, I'm not helping. P.S. The recent updates are not good. You guys can scold me, or else I'll feel bad." End of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.